kill me here, please.
Subaru earnestly pleaded to Beatrice as he embraced Emilia's remains. If this was going to be the end, he wanted it to be with Emilia in his arms. Having achieved the worst of all worlds through his self-interested efforts, Subaru would indulge himself to the bitter end. Subaru squeezed Emilia harder, closing his eyes as he waited for the end. He imagined he would soon fall into that silent time.
Two.
Subaru, having selfishly decided to end it all, abruptly heard something. It was a small, frail, halting voice. Without thinking, Subaru let out the breath he had been holding and opened his eyelids to look up at her. As before, Beatrice was standing in front of him, gazing down at him all the while. She embraced her tiny body with both arms, biting her trembling lips as if she were freezing.
You to ask Betty to kill you. Is that not too cruel? I wonder.
She said it with a tearful look and a choked voice, leaving Subaru completely at a loss. No matter how many times he blinked, Beatrice's thick sorrow would not vanish. The girl Subaru knew would never wear that expression. After all, she was supposed to hate him. Even though she was always blunt, she'd put up with Subaru because she had some goodness in her, but he thought she was someone who could heartlessly lay into you by nature. Even though he thought she might not readily accept, or might even turn him down, he expected it to be accompanied by disdain and mockery.
You don't understand. You don't understand anything.
Subaru had never dreamed she would refuse to kill him with such a sad expression.
Beatrice.
Shall I refuse every single thing you ask, I wonder? If you want to die so much, go die by yourself. I refuse to do it.
Beatrice shook her head and covered her eyes with a hand, suppressing the emotion on her face. Hiding her welling tears rather than letting them fall, she turned that hand towards Subaru.
What are you? Everything is...
In that instant, the world began to distort. Everything around Subaru warped, and a crack appeared. These were preludes to the destruction of the world. Or so he thought, instantly clutching the body in his arms close to him. Looking down at him, Beatrice spoke again with cold eyes.
If you're going to be this useless, having you here is a bother. At the very least, perhaps I can protect this mansion, I suppose?
What do you say? No, Beatrice, you're...
Do not think Betty is like Roswaal. Pain, anguish, suffering, sadness, fear. Perhaps Betty hates all these things.
She replied to the question that was not a question with an answer that was not an answer. Space distorted, and the resulting fissure enveloping Subaru brought him beyond the reach of all known physical laws. It didn't hurt.
If you are going to die, can you do it in a place where Betty will not see? I wonder.
Though her final murmur was cruel, she could not conceal even a tiny fragment of her desolation. He could say nothing. He understood nothing. But her emotions did tell him one thing. Subaru's decision and behavior had made Beatrice sad. The distortion reached its zenith, and then it snapped back to normal. Something like static ran across his field of vision as the world was instantly swept away. In the next moment, the distorted air succumbed without a trace and vanished. The gouge in the blood-stained floor was the only sign that Subaru and Emilia had ever been there. Beatrice watched the two vanish before leaning back against a wall with a tired look. She sluggishly raised her palms, lifting them over her eyes as if that would hide the world from her.
Mother, how much longer must Betty? How much longer must Betty?
The murmur of the girl left alone in the world petered out, reaching no one. Without warning, Subaru was cast out of a rip in space, plunging headfirst onto mossy plants.
Bah!
Subaru spat out saliva that tasted like dirt, then lifted his head and looked around. Bunches of trees appeared in his dim field of vision. Surrounded by nature in all directions, Subaru realized that he had been cast into the middle of a forest.
A forest at night? Somewhere in the mountains?
He was only able to see it all because the moonlight was unhindered. A cold breeze rustled the leaves of the many trees, with the sounds of insects dominating the gloomy forest under the twilight sky. The fact that it was night outside the mansion made Subaru aware that he'd slept for more than half a day.
Teleportation, or something like it, I guess?
The air had bent, and right after the resulting fissure had swallowed him up, he'd been dumped out into the forest. Using the passage magic spell, Beatrice was able to freely rearrange where each door in the mansion connected. Maybe there was no reason to expect she couldn't relocate people one by one if she had a mind to. But even if he could understand that much, he still had no idea what Beatrice had really been thinking. Even then, the final image of her crying refused to fade from his mind. Though she had turned him down, he had been sure she'd disdainfully leave him there. And yet, Beatrice had looked at Subaru with dejection and despair in her eyes.
It's as if she'd expected more of me.
Subaru himself had rejected such notions, thinking them exceedingly self-serving. He'd had acknowledged he was a spirit of pestilence, unable to do anything, hadn't he? He'd have accepted it, hadn't he? If he couldn't expect anything from himself, no one else could, either. Having even someone who hated him expect something of him was nothing but the height of pride, even though he had kept running and running from other people's expectations long before he'd reached that world.
Man, I'm hopeless, aren't I?
A crooked smile came over Subaru as he slowly knelt up on the grass. His legs seemed less mobile than expected. When Subaru looked down, he realized that there was something other than him weighing on his knees. Even then, after tumbling through space, Emilia's remains continued to rest atop his lap.
Emilia.
In that world of gloom, a trickle of moonlight shone upon her pale face. She seemed neither in pain nor at peace in death. Instead, she seemed full of conflict, unable to understand the cause of the misfortune afflicting her body. Namely, how her heart had been crushed while she was still alive, in a world of frozen time. But even if she hadn't felt any pain, that was no saving grace. There was no such thing as a peaceful death, nor was death a saving grace for anyone, except for Subaru himself in that moment. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." As he looked down at Emilia's face, droplets fell upon her pale cheek. He had thought his tears had run dry, but they flowed from a bottomless well as Subaru was racked with ceaseless torture. He heard voices blaming him. The people Subaru had met were shouting down at him in frigid anger. There was a girl with silver hair and a girl with blue hair among them.
Someone, anyone, please kill me.
Under a hail of shouts that would not vanish, Subaru picked up Emilia and rose to his feet. From there, he stepped on the grass and broke branches as he began slowly walking into the forest. He could hear beasts howling in the distance. If he met those black demon beasts now, he felt like he'd greet them with a smile on his face. He wanted them to consume his flesh, his mana, his life, anything they pleased. For if that did not happen, there would be no salvation for Subaru Natsuki. Heading toward the howls, Subaru advanced into the dark depths of the forest. He no longer felt the weight of carrying Emilia, nor fatigue from walking along the cold mountain road with poor visibility. He wondered if it was because he had a clear goal and was earnestly working toward it. That would be pretty pathetic. Nor did the word pathetic begin to describe his fate.
Here, past this ravine, and then...
Carefully heading downhill, he climbed up the twisting tree roots as if they were stairs, like a candle on the verge of burning out. He was exhausting the last strength his life had to offer. But that was not the only cause of the lack of hesitation in his steps. Put simply, he remembered the path. After all, this place was...
Yeah, there you are.
A thin, heartfelt smile came over his lips as if he was relieved not to have missed his mark. Mad laughter came over him, the sort only a man smeared with blood and free of his sanity was capable of. Subaru knew a man who laughed like that. If he looked in the mirror at that moment, he'd probably see the same smile on his own face. Seeing such an expression ate away at your mind, its sheer malevolence giving rise to a physiological sense of revulsion. But those to whom he turned that crazed smile were accustomed to the sight. Inside the nighttime forest, a group in black outfits that blended in with the darkness surrounded Subaru. As if rising from the shadows themselves, they had silently encircled Subaru, not even allowing him to sense their auras as they continued to stare right at him. Their gazes held no hostility, nor amiability, nor malice, nor benevolence. He couldn't sense anything resembling will at all. Subaru, under their scrutiny, recalled his encounter with them from the first time around.
Same thing, huh?
Just as in Subaru's memories, the black-robed figures all lowered their heads then and there. Like marionettes lacking wills of their own, they showed Subaru respect for the first time. Subaru had no idea why they demonstrated admiration for him. All he knew for sure was that they were all devotees of the witch cult, and that the darkness enveloping Subaru had some relationship to the witch they worshipped.
Out of my way.
Really, there were many things that he wanted to ask them. If this had happened before he'd resigned himself to death, he'd have had a mountain of inquiries. But by then, even that sentiment was a mere worthless relic. At Subaru's brief command, the black-robed figures did not voice a single sound of dissent as they melted into the darkness and vanished. As they disappeared from his sight, Subaru noticed that the world was filled with silence. He no longer heard the howls of the beasts he wanted to come after him, nor the ceaseless cries of insects, not even the wind. It was as if all living creatures scorned the witch cult. Perhaps the reason wasn't just the witch cult, but Subaru's presence too. Perhaps the cult and Subaru being together in one place painted so repulsive a picture that the world itself recoiled. He thought that this latter assessment suited the current him far better. A faint laugh came over Subaru as he advanced past where the witch cultists had surrounded him. He passed beyond the roots, stepped across the soil, crushed the tree leaves with the bottoms of his shoes, and finally, the forest opened. A rocky, sheer precipice spread out before his eyes.
Beloved acolyte, I have been waiting for you!
Standing before the rock wall was a gaunt man, bearing the same mad smile that Subaru did.
My! And furthermore, you carry in your arms. Could that be the half-demon girl?
When Subaru approached the rocky area, Betelgeuse cocked his head and looked at Emilia, whom Subaru held in his arms. The madman's head remained parallel to the ground as his tongue slid out in amusement, dribbling spittle.
Heavens, for her to lose her life before even undertaking our trial! What a tragic fate! What an untimely demise! Ah, and what diligence upon your part! On the verge of the trial, before I even act, you have stolen the half-demon's body and life.
Betelgeuse shouted, hailing Emilia's death with exaggerated gestures, waving his arms around. Subaru then noticed that the witch cult adherents had gathered around Betelgeuse at some point, all of them on their knees as they devotedly listened to the madman's ravings.
Me. Diligence?
Hearing Subaru's halting murmur, Betelgeuse rushed over with jubilant laughter.
Yes, that is right. Diligence! It is splendid! Unlike us, slow to decide, meager of wit, and lacking decisiveness, you made the witch's will manifest before any other.
Then he slid onto his knees and fell prostrate, virtually slamming his forehead against the rocky ground.
Compared to you, my fingers and I were so slow, so foolish, so lacking. Ah, forgive me for being unable to requite your love. Forgive this slothful, unfaithful flesh. Forgive this stupid man, unable to respond to the love you bestow upon me.
A flood of tears poured from Betelgeuse as he pounded the rock with an arm, nearly splitting his forehead with the intensity of his apology. The fervent act of self-harm was accompanied by a spray of blood. Subaru could see bone from where his wrist was cut. Despite that, Betelgeuse did not cease his violent action. Indeed, each of the faithful kneeling all around rushed to emulate the madman's self-destructive actions. It was a cacophony of blood and agony, and as he watched it all, Subaru felt nothing. Even with the man he had so hated right before him, his heart was unmoved whatsoever.
Ah, what can I do for you, who fulfilled the trial in my place while I failed to respond to her feelings? Tell me, please, what may I do for you so that I may prove that my love is not slothful?
Betelgeuse came close, the blood trickling from his head causing tears of blood to flow as he made his earnest plea.
Kill me.
Surely even the expression on that madman's face would register shock from the sudden request.
Are you sure about that?
But it did not. Without a moment's hesitation, he kicked Subaru away. The wind kicked out of him. Subaru sailed back as Protelgus watched him with an expression of ecstasy.
Ah, splendid, splendid indeed! With the trial fulfilled in search of salvation, my actions and those of my believers seeking salvation may have thus become diligent. Ah, we are spared from being slothful, both you and I. You have my thanks, and my diligence has earned her love.
Pateljuice harbored no misgivings about the brooding Subaru's reply, nor felt a single pang of conscience over his own actions, seeing neither as contrary to the laws of the world in any way. Under the guise of diligence, his bloodlust had been unleashed. Subaru, seeing this in the madman, closed his eyes, his heart hardly stirred. At the very least, it was what Subaru wanted to see just then.
Though I must say...
When he heard Patelgus mutter something, Subaru felt hostility press upon his skin.
Unable to even pass a single trial, not even facing a single deadly sin, bearing great expectations, only to stumble over the first stone in her path.
The madman looked down at the sleeping Emilia, sighing.
Ah, you were lazy.
He had no greater words to demean Emilia's death. Subaru knew this, because he recalled how the madman. ReZero by Tapi Nagatsuki, produced by Sixtail Novel with Artale. AI. If you are interested in creating your own audiobook like this, visit Artale AI and claim free premium with code Artale. Had disgraced the life of a girl precious to him in a world long past. Subaru opened his eyes. That instant, he saw a dark cloud approaching, taking the form of a hand. For a single moment, he recoiled from the painful memories rushing into the back of his mind. But this evil hand was different. His body could move, his feet could move, his arms could move. Hence, his body evaded it. As the black hand gently slid toward him, Subaru leaped to the side, holding Emilia in his arms. The hand slipped past, seeming perplexed as it vanished. Subaru's breath was ragged as he watched it disappear.
Just now, you saw my unseen hands, did you not?
The madman inserted his twig-like fingers into his mouth, crushing his fingertips with his teeth one by one.
That will not do! That will not do at all! It is strange, it is wrong. There is some error, some mistake. My power, the power of sloth, the unseen hands, her favor bestowed unto me, that another has set eyes upon them is unforgivable.
Spitting blood, Pateljuice chewed on fragments of bone and nail as he glared at Subaru with bloodshot eyes. In the next instant, black arms rose out from Pateljuice's back. Pateljuice's shadow exploded into 7 black limbs that madly danced about. A chill ran up Subaru's spine at the resemblance to the 2 evil hands that punished Subaru when he touched upon the taboo.
But if I can see them, and my body can move, he could dodge them. The speed of the black hands was not all that fast. Though they boasted the power to rip a human limb from limb at a distance, their greatest menace was their power of invisibility. Their greatest advantage no longer worked on Subaru. And with the last wisps of his life burning down, Subaru exhibited physical abilities beyond his limitations.
Why we? Why can you avoid them? Do you see them? This love belongs to me alone.
Deep down, there's only one guy I don't want to be killed by, and that's you.
Subaru twisted to evade one hand and leaped forward to dodge a different set of fingertips stretching up toward him. He crouched instantly to avoid the 2 coming at him from the left and right, practically falling forward and closing the distance with Pateljuice. Seeing the insanity on Pateljuice's face twist into shock, a dark pleasure filled Subaru's belly. He had just remembered the fact that he had wanted to kill that madman.
Bijiga.
Taking the shortest possible route, Subaru slammed his head into the bridge of the madman's nose, violently kicking his body as he rocked backward. The black hands flailed about, unable to strike precisely. Now blood was pouring from Subaru's forehead, too, cut by Pateljuice's front teeth. The heavy bleeding got into his eyes, blotting out his vision on the right side. A moment after, he noticed something sliding under his feet. It grabbed Subaru's legs and sent him flying. The instant before he slammed against a large tree, Subaru abandoned all thoughts of cushioning the blow, clutching Emilia's remains even more strongly. not to cling to her but to protect her.
Gway!
And so his back collided against the tree, making him feel a seemingly lethal crack in his spine. Several vertebrae broke and his recently closed wounds opened all at once. Each one cried out in a chorus of ferocious pain as Subaru fell onto the ground, writhing, and bubbles appeared around his mouth.
Disgraceful! Disgraceful, is it not? Ah, I am so relieved, truly relieved. At that rate, I would have wallowed in idleness, all my actions rendered meaningless. But I am indeed diligent, exhausting my efforts for love.
Shut up, dim, wit!
His breathing sounded strange. He felt like he'd taken heavy damage to his lungs. Even so, he laughed and mocked Patelgeuse, bubbles of blood dripping from his lips all the while.
What love, you moron! That so-called love you say you got. I can see it too, can't I? She's been cheating on you, sucker.
What are you saying? Saying, my brain treens.
Patelgeuse tore hair from his head as he raged, eyes wide open. He walked toward the fallen Subaru, violently kicking Emilia from his arms as if to deliberately distance her from Subaru. Emilia's body rolled, slamming into the roots of various trees. Patelgeuse glanced sideways at it and laughed.
Denigrating my love is impermissible. Ah, I have decided. It is decided. Though the half-demon who should have undergone the trial perished beforehand, those sheltering her yet remain.
Patelgeuse ranted and raved as one of his black hands lifted Subaru by his neck. Subaru's eyes snapped wide as the force threatened to rip his head off his shoulders. The brutal pain left him unable to speak.
First, I shall eradicate those associated with the mansion. Next, I shall sacrifice the residents of the village nearby for her affection. Nothing shall remain, for any survivors would be proof of sloth. I, the pinnacle of diligence, and my fingers shall render judgment upon all. The highway is sealed by the mist, so there is no one to interfere with my love.
Shouting and spitting in his agitated state, Patelgeuse laid out his diabolical scheme.
Before that, you seemed to clutch that half-demon's flesh as if it was quite precious to you. If I destroy it, I wonder what wonderful sounds I will hear you make.
Patelgeuse's head tilted, his lips twisted, and his eyes filled with inhuman curiosity. 5 arms other than the one holding Subaru up crawled out from the madman's back, each moving independently as they wriggled their way toward Emilia's remains. One grasped each of her limbs, with the last hand wrapping around her slender neck.
Do you see them? Do you understand what is about to happen?
Top! At that moment, Subaru was racked with fear precisely because he could see it. It made him remember every detail of what this man's black hands did to Rem's body when he couldn't see them. And now, those same destructive impulses were directed toward Emilia's flesh. He had no power to prevent the vile act. Subaru's grief only deepened Patelgeuse's crazed, amused smile. All that remained was for him to cruelly rip Emilia's flesh asunder. "What are you doing?"
Without warning, the voice poured down from the heavens, coldly thrumming in the ears of all present. Patelgeuse's expression shifted, his gaze drifting around in search of the speaker. The voice had enough power in it, and well-honed anger to make even his expression change. Finally, Patelgeuse's gaze turned toward a single point in the sky and stopped. A second after, Subaru, still held aloft by his neck, looked at the same point in the sky too.
I repeat.
An incredible number of icicles poured down, filling their vision, seemingly blotting out the nighttime sky. A breath surged, dyed white. In the blink of an eye, a cold that threatened to chill the whole world spread throughout the forest. The black-robed figures still on their knees in Patelgeuse, with a crazed smile over him, were at a loss for words.
What are you lowlifes doing to my daughter?
The apocalypse beast of eternal frost dyed the world white. To Subaru, it was the being who would bring him death at the end of his 10th time, the 10th world.
Since being invited to this world, Subaru had experienced death time and again. Under normal circumstances, it was an ordeal no one faced more than once a lifetime. That common sense rule had been violated, and Subaru, who had already been granted 10 opportunities to grapple with death, knew as much about it as anyone. And having come to know it so well, Subaru had become able to sense its approach. His refined senses told him loud and clear that death was on its way.
You lot sure like to do whatever you please.
The voice, bearing penetrating cold and oppressive might, had come from the icy veil in the sky above. The voice hailed from a small, mouse-colored cat, its emotions as frigid as the horde of sharp-tipped icicles accompanying it on its way to the ground. It was small enough to fit in the palm of your hand, with a tail about as long as it was tall. It had a pink nose and round eyes. Its short arms were folded, almost human-like, as its expression was fraught with deep hatred. Patelgeuse and the other members of the witch cult were silent before the supernatural being that spoke the language of men, and Subaru, who was with them, felt his throat closing up in shock for a different reason. He had never before seen that being, that spirit, shaking in anger like that. As one present in that place, feeling the overflow of his anger, he knew that death had come to the world.
Puck?
Under the white mist surrounding the floating spirit, Puck, the forest in their vicinity let out a crack-like sound as it was transformed. The trees turned white, as if the green had been sucked out of them. Their mana-absorbed leaves, branches, and trunks froze over, dead as they fell. The ground itself displayed identical effects. First, the flowers died, then the cold crept over the soil, and finally it reached Subaru, also on the earth, stabbing him all over with burning pain. He felt lethargy gradually rising from the depths of his body, causing his breathing to falter as his mind began to fade. Long before, Subaru had experienced being forcibly robbed of his mana at Beatrice's hands. The angered Puck was employing that power on a global scale, turning the world's power into his own. Beside Subaru, holding back a whimper, Betelgeuse backed up a step with heavy sweat on his brow, and the kneeling witch cult was gasping for oxygen through their open mouths, almost like fish.
The witch cult, no matter how much time passes, you never change, do you? In every age, it is you who bring me the saddest things of all.
Puck spoke as if dealing with noxious insects as he trained his eyes on a single point in the forest. Subaru, following his gaze, saw that there was a single space left that Puck's power was not affecting. Only the prone girl's corpse was protected from the end of the world.
My poor Leah. You died without understanding anything.
After gazing longingly at Emilia, Puck turned his eyes toward those who still lived.
Depriving my daughter of her life is a grave crime. Do not think any of you will escape alive.
How dare a mere spirit? How dare you speak? A half-demon failing an ordeal is nothing but a filthy pretender. The blame is yours for your sloth and inability to protect this fool. Ah! My brain is trembling!
Betelgeuse responded to Puck's threats by raising both hands to the sky, flying into a rage. The madman's bloodshot eyeballs were unfocused as Betelgeuse's welling bloodlust erupted in a geyser of froth.
All that shall transpire, all that must transpire. The proper course of history is recorded in my gospel. The witch loves me, and I must repay her with diligence. Whereas you, lowly spirit, wallow in idleness. Whereas you, lowly spirit, wallow in idleness.
Love was it. To Betelgeuse, acts of worship toward the witch were nothing but repaying her for her love. For the madman, actions that displayed his adoration for the witch had absolute priority over everything else. The witch was supreme, and the witch was the greatest. Furthermore, nothing and no one was permitted to defy his love for the witch.
Death to half-demons, and you, too, must pay for your idleness. The witch's favor is the truth that lets my heart beat. All must be sacrificed for it.
Betelgeuse waved his arms, ranting, raving, and loudly stamping his foot. Puck looked down upon Betelgeuse's madness with eyes that were cold to their very core. They contained neither pity nor anger, only a lucid view of the low worth of the object before them. Puck's and Betelgeuse's absolutely incompatible wills clashed, fueling each other's bloodlust.
My fingers! This fool must pay for his!
D!
The descending icicles poured down on the witch cult adherents, skewering them and pinning them in place. The cultists' bodies and limbs were impaled against the ground, pierced like bugs for study. The air creaked, and the flesh of the dead witch cult worshippers froze over, turning the rocky area into an ice sculpture exhibit. Instantly, without warning, Puck had taken nearly 20 lives. During that time, his gaze did not waver in any way. Neither did Betelgeuse's. Unmoved by the loss of the followers who obeyed his commands, who were now literal sacrificial pawns, he exploited Puck's temporary shift of attention away from him.
My brain is trembling!
His lips twisted darkly, and a moment later, Betelgeuse's shadow exploded. Simultaneously, Subaru's body was cast aside as a total of 7 arms bore upon Puck, floating in the sky. With Puck's power, dealing with the gently advancing evil hands was child's play. But Puck made no reaction to the advance of the hands, because he didn't see them.
Puck?
When Subaru tried to raise his voice to warn of the danger, the voice and eyes Puck turned toward him made his blood run cold.
Be quiet, Subaru. I will deal with you, La. No!
But before the spirit finished speaking, the black hands trapped his tiny body, which vanished from Subaru's view. Puck's body was so small that a normal adult's hand was more than large enough to conceal it from view. There was no way anyone could have seen it through 7 hands, and each of those black hands were so overwhelmingly powerful that they could rip a human body apart with ease.
Carelessness, negligence! In other words, sloth! You should have eliminated me immediately! You possessed such power, yet you neglected its proper use, and this is the result! This, thistis.
The unseen hands that only Subaru could detect enveloped Puck's body and crushed it. Before Betelgeuse, who danced with mad delight, the Great Spirit was cruelly erased.
Don't make me laugh.
In the next moment, Subaru saw the converging black limbs being blown apart.
That's all? You're 400 years too young to be invoking the witch. If you really want to kill me?
The frozen trees, unable to bear their own weight, shattered into shards of ice with one flick of his tail. The corpses of the witch cult followers who had become ice sculptures were smashed to smithereens. The front paws responsible for this made the ground under them into an absolute zero zone of death. Its softest breath riveled a raging blizzard, and within that white mist, its eyes were like dazzling, glittering gold, eyes that mercilessly towered over a world of death.
Then stretch half of Satella's 1,000 shadows toward me.
It was a 4-legged feline beast with gray fur, boasting such size that it stood above the forest. It was the beast of the end that had destroyed the mansion and brought death to Subaru in a prior world. It was indeed a grand manifestation of the end. The intensity of the cold went up another level, and it hurt to even keep his eyes open to watch the world go white. Subaru endured the pain as he looked up at the beast agape.
What?
A shaking voice echoed from a tiny corner of that world of ultimate cold.
What is it you are telling me to bring?
This time, Betelgeuse's scream brought a vertical cut to his parched lips, from which a trace of blood trickled, but in the blink of an eye, this, too, froze over, bringing an end to the bleeding and pain. Subaru feared that closing his eyes amid the blowing cold meant he would never open them again. He took in Betelgeuse's final cry and looked up at the beast once more.
Puck, is that you?
I suppose it would be a little mean to say, isn't it obvious, too?
The gray-colored beast's titanic mouth moved in reply to Subaru's broken question. Each word came with a gale, but it was the enormous beast's sarcasm that confirmed Subaru's suspicions. With that answer, Subaru came to accept the fact that in the previous world, and the world before that, Subaru had died at the end because... While Subaru was compelled to stay silent, Betelgeuse glared at Puck and murmured, possible. The madman thrust his intact hand into his mouth, crushing his fingers one by one, and they oozed blood. It was as if that pain was what tethered his perpetual madness to the world.
This is impossible. It cannot be. A mere spirit, a lowly spirit, cannot possess such power. If that was possible,
Echidna.
Pateljuice's movements stopped as bloody froth trickled from the corner of his lips, his eyes wide open. Puck had whispered a word that had interrupted Pateljuice's denial. The color of Pateljuice's face had changed the instant he heard what was apparently a name.
As a man of the cult, you understand what that name means, don't you?
filthy.
Patelgus's reaction to it was nothing short of dramatic, along with the sound of something hard, blood gush from his mouth. It came from his molars. He was so angry he had bitten down on his teeth hard enough to break them.
It is repugnant to even speak that name. Ha! You poor lazy fool, ignorant of fear! You dare speak the name of a fallen witch, a witch other than Satella, before me!
Pateljuice's eyes had gone from bloodshot to scarlet-dyed. Maybe the arteries had burst open. Tears of blood flowed from the corners. The madman turned his bitten and torn fingertips toward Puck.
My faith, my love, that is nothing less than an insult to everything I offer to her.
A human living mere decades has no business arguing time with a spirit.
Just like that, Patelgeuse ceased his mad writhing. No, this was not something he had done consciously. He had frozen from the feet up, and that had made him stop. As Subaru lay on his side, his vision blurry and white, he saw his mortal enemy brought to the verge of death. Patelgeuse, too, knew that his freezing meant his death was not long in the offing. However, to the very end, his madness was directed not toward his own impending death, but at Puck, towering before him.
The depth of one's faith has nothing to do with time. You are a lazy beast, born with eternal time, yet exhausting most of it in idleness. Do not compare me with a fool such as you. My brain is treebling.
Even knowing his own end was near, Pateljuice's madness never wavered. To Subaru, who knew no phenomenon more absolute or terrifying than death, Pateljuice's behavior was truly deviant. Seeing him profess his faith at the moment before his demise was proof that he was a truly corrupt being.
Death is not punishment enough for you. That's why I hate your kind.
The trial has been fulfilled. No matter what happens to this filthy body, so long as my feelings reach the witch I revere, she shall grant her favor. It will be so good to see her again.
Spreading both hands before the sky above, Pateljuice let out a cackle. The snow blew with greater intensity, dyeing his gaunt body white. Subaru wasn't sure whether his voice or his movements gently slowed first. Yet even then, Pateljuice's laughter did not cease. He was one with his buoyant madness until his laughter finally ceased and, with it, his life.
Quit while you were ahead, didn't you?
The gray beast murmured as it thrust down its front paw, smashing the Pateljuice ice sculpture into dust. Even as Subaru watched the madman's life expire, his shattered fragments carried away by the wind, no strong emotion stirred within him. He had hated the man so. He had so wished to kill him. Pateljuice was where it had all started. Subaru had believed that killing him would make everything turn out all right. But was that truly the result?
Though he had witnessed the death of his hated foe, Subaru had only hollow emptiness inside him. The defeat of Patelgeuse meant clearing away the threat posed by the witch cult. But Rem, who ought to have been there, sharing his joy, had been erased from the world. Emilia, who should have been quietly waiting for him to bring good news upon his return, had died at Subaru's own hands. The accumulated weight of both their deaths had made Subaru desire his own demise, but in the end he could not even manage that, and a different Avenger had claimed retribution. Subaru had nothing left. He'd done everything over and as a result achieved nothing.
Now, then.
Subaru felt his own powerlessness beaten into him as the beast quietly looked down upon him. He was reminded anew that the giant beast was Puck. The enormity of that truth made his body quake. He was reminded of how, previously, he'd watched with detached bemusement when the knights and the Council of Elders at the royal palace had acted so terrified of fighting Puck when they heard his alias.
Let's talk, shall we?
Now, he was painfully aware of just what they had felt back then. The cold was making it hard to think. Already, the pain tearing across his whole body had vanished. Subaru heard the gentle footsteps of his own death drawing near, and just as his body slackened from the sweet premonition that the end was nigh,
Oh, this won't do. You're bleeding out too much. I'll put a stop to that.
Dwa!
He felt like he was being roasted alive, waking up his fading senses. With merciless pain blocking his throat, Subaru saw that each wound on his body was audibly freezing over. White steam rose as sharp ice connected, stitched, and tethered his wounds, even the ones inside his body. Through this act of treatment, abandoning all consideration for the human body, Subaru's flesh was violently healed. Blood vessels exploded within his eyes, dyeing his vision scarlet. It was more than an ow, ow, ow. The hell that had erupted within his body transcended even pain.
Subaru, you have committed 3 sins.
Subaru reeled, howling with a voiceless scream. The giant beast continued to speak as if nothing had happened. Though he had become enormous in size, his mouth lined with endless sharp fangs, and the tone of his voice had changed. The cadence was as gentle as always. That terrified him all the more.
First, you broke your promise with Leah. It seems you do not truly understand just how weighty a promise formed between 2 people is to a spirit mage. I suppose you truly do not know how much your rashly breaking that promise hurt Leah.
His mind rejected an understanding of what Puck was saying. No, his mind was dominated by pain. His internal organs were frozen, and his broken bones were connected to one another by ice gouging obstructed flesh. The crimson ice over his open wounds had been ripped away, the areas affected frozen to the core, violently stopping the bleeding. The freezing had spread farther. The pain had spread farther. Death was spreading. It hurts. Hurt church 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 church.
It. Second, you ignored Leah's wishes and came back. Do you even know how much that drove her into a corner and made her suffer when she didn't want to see you again? Not only did you break your promise, you had to trample on Leah's heart as you pleased.
With Subaru on the white ground, limbs spread wide, Puck drew his face close and blew with his icy breath. Subaru's flowing tears became needles stabbing his eyeballs. His brain convulsed from the intense agony.
And third, you let Leah die.
It was like having his very soul filed down. The extreme pain made Subaru forget how to breathe. Amid that agony, like having every nerve in his body immersed in magma, Subaru cursed his own shallowness. He thought that pain was a lesser thing than death. He was wrong. He was wrong about everything. Pain, death, fear, these smashed the heart of the weakling named Subaru Netsuki in equal measure. The soul of Subaru Netsuki had been backed into a corner with nowhere to run.
As Subaru's sluggish mind began to appreciate that terrifying truth, Puck stated to him,
In accordance with the pact, I'll be destroying the world now.
Puck's eyes had contained anger. Only at that juncture did a new emotion begin to come to the fore.
I will bury everything under ice and snow as my parting gift to Leah.
That won't.
It has nothing to do with making her happy or not. No matter what the pact, I will not break what has been agreed upon.
Puck's eyes narrowed as he responded to Subaru's incoherent voice.
But that act will end unfulfilled, I imagine, even if I spread this world of ice to cover every land, like the forest where Leah and I dwelled. The Sword Saint will stand before me. That is a battle I will not win.
Puck seemed to lament the disparity in strength when he brought up a certain red-haired hero's other name. Subaru couldn't believe he was hearing those words. Puck, wielding such overpowering might, had bluntly stated that he had no chance of defeating the Sword Saint. And if Puck knew he'd be struck down in the process, why would he sacrifice himself in such a battle?
Why?
Leah was the entire reason for my existence.
Puck responded to Subaru's inquiry. The wind grew even colder, stabbing Subaru's flesh, filling up his eyes, freezing his blood. The end was nigh.
It It is meaningless for me to remain in a world without her. Now that I've lost her, I will not allow the world to move on. For me, everything ended when that girl died.
When Puck finished speaking, the wind's intensity suddenly spiked.
How long will it take for a person to die if he's slowly, gradually frozen from the tips of his extremities on up? Have you ever wondered that, Subaru?
But that.
I take that as a yes. I want you to learn the answer.
Slowly, the chill consumed more and more of his flesh. His wounds and internal organs were already frozen, so they were exempt as the rest of Subaru's flesh expired from the fingertips up. If pain could truly drive a person mad, his sanity would have been shattered long before. He wanted his mind to be ripped apart, smashed to bits, scattered in all directions. For if not,
Mist is coming. It seems you have lured quite a nasty one.
he couldn't hear. Someone was saying something, but he couldn't hear.
Gluttonies? Nowadays they call it the white whale, don't they? Calling it over, letting Leah die, losing your own life. You truly are incorrigible. Do you know that?
He couldn't hear, but even though he shouldn't have heard it, he heard the voice. He heard laughter from somewhere. A mocking voice. Cackle, cackle. He knew that laughter. The voice of the man he hated to the point of death. Where's it coming from? With the end near, his consciousness sought an answer to that question. Then he realized it. The incessant cackling was coming from his own throat. Ecstasy began to rule his brain, drowning out his pain. He took his first steps into a spreading world of madness. The way it warped everything around him felt good. The laughter wouldn't stop. His own laughter was mocking him. The one who had let Rem die, who had killed Emilia, and who was dying like a dog himself. Ah, yes. He was truly, how would you put it?
Subaru, you're lazy.
With a sharp sound, he blacked out. It probably was not only his consciousness and his life that had been severed. It was something more. Something that had been barely holding him together that audibly came apart in that moment. Amid the white world, everything vanished. He couldn't tell if his flesh had dissolved, if it had been smashed to pieces, or if it would remain as an ice sculpture for all eternity. No matter how terrible the end of the body he had left behind, it was all the same to him now. There was only one thing he understood with clarity. Over the course of repeating, he'd seen things end cruelly, with the situation growing worse with each repetition. And now, having destroyed with his own hands that which he most wanted to protect, he finally realized it. No one expected anything of Subaru Natsuki, not even him. No matter how many times he experienced it, he'd never get used to the feeling of the senses he had lost suddenly come rushing back. He no longer felt frozen to the core, or even cold at all. And he could tell that white world into which he had sunk deeper and deeper was gone. In the blink of an eye, all his dulled senses became clear, and every last thing was just as it had once been. Blood flowed through the limbs that had known so much pain. The agony of his nerves being immersed in ice was no more. The cold stabbing his skin had been peeled away, replaced by dazzling rays that could give him a sunburn. What? Sounds from hustle and bustle to the left and right intermingled as his dead sense of hearing returned with a vengeance. Blocking out the meaningless noise, Subaru checked the condition of his body, his frozen limbs, his injured spine, and his internal organs that had been turned to sherbet were all functioning without any problems. Everything was back as it should be. Subaru felt relief that the body lost to him was under his control again. And what brought Subaru more tranquility than anything was...
Why are you staring into space like that, Subaru?
Behind the counter, Rem tilted her head slightly, gazing at him with concern. He had been abandoned by everything, and everyone, had an implacable sense of powerlessness drilled into him, had despaired at the loss and disappointment at what his own actions had wrought, and after dying like a helpless dog, he had returned.
Rem!
Yes, it is me. Your Rem. What might be the matter?
Remembered, too, the call of his voice, slipping away from behind the counter and heading out of the shop. Subaru was rooted to the spot as Rem walked right in front of him, reaching out with her hand and touching him on the cheek. Her brows knit in worry, revealing a tinge of gloom on her noble face.
I am sorry for not noticing. The crowd has worn you out, yes? I am a failure as a maid to have forgotten my most important duty of all.
Tired. Yeah, that's right. I am.
As Rem's hand rested on his cheek, he slowly lifted up his hand, pressing it down upon hers. The touch between them made Rem raise her eyebrows in surprise, but Subaru's haggard voice and expression left her at a loss for words. Rem looked like she was trying to say something, but Subaru didn't even look at her. Instead, he felt Rem's firm, solid presence against his hand, as if clinging to that warmth to keep it from running away.
I guess all that, falling and getting worn down, was exhausting. Yet in spite of all that, the Rem he had surely lost was right there with him at that very moment. So,
Subaru?
Subaru resolved that, if nothing else, he would never let go of the girl right before his eyes.
He ran rapidly through the crowd, heading down a gently descending slope. He scowled from the dust kicked up by a passing dragon carriage, but Subaru's gaze was aimed straight in front of him. He knew where he was going. His running feet were sure. When he thought back, Subaru had harbored nothing but uncertainty during those repeated days. Uncertainty about what he should be like, about what lay in Emilia's heart, about whether his existence held any purpose, about whether he could bring out the best of all possible futures, all amid a vortex of madness. He was an unsure man lost in an uncertain foreign world, but Subaru, unable to make a single manly step in one direction throughout, advanced with clarity of purpose he had never before known. Finally, he'd come to understand, now that he'd arrived at that answer, the repeated days had not been in vain. Backed into a mental and physical corner, Subaru truly realized for the first time what he could do, what he must do.
Rue?
His uncertainty lifted. His gaze was trained squarely on his objective, his legs powerfully thudding along the earth. His body was light, relieved of the pressure on his heart. Subaru wasn't afraid of anything anymore.
Please, Subaru, listen to me.
Pulling his arm forward, he could see the main street at the end of the downward slope. Even in the royal capital, it boasted the greatest width, continuing all the way to the main gate through the stout walls that surrounded the capital. Everyone entering or leaving the royal capital had to pass through that gate. With the announcement of the royal selection, the main street was even busier with people coming and going. At that very moment, it was bustling with the numerous people along it. He cut past the shadow of a building. Abruptly, sun rays slid into his field of vision. Subaru used a hand to shield his eyes from the bright light as he raised his face up, looking at the symbols carved into the gate that read, Lugunica, the royal capital. One more step, and she and Subaru would be...
Subaru.
Having brought him all that way, his feet stopped when he felt a sharp tug on his arm. The unanticipated resistance made Subaru look back. As Rem stood still, her eyes wavered with bewilderment. When Rem freed her hand from his grasp, she seemed to shrink as she pleaded with him.
What's wrong? What has happened? If you do not explain,
Hearing those words, Subaru accepted that it was right for Rem to harbor misgivings. In her eyes, Subaru's transformation had to look sudden, even unthinkable. It was natural for her to be angry with him for dragging her by the arm all that way without an explanation.
Ah, my bad. I was in a bit of a hurry. I have a lot of things to think about. Sorry for cutting corners on explaining.
It troubles me, you know. Even I understand you have many things on your mind, Subaru, but you must speak to me about them. Though I do not mind you being assertive.
Rem put both hands to her very slightly reddened cheeks as she let out a sigh of relief. Perhaps she had sensed from the tone of Subaru's voice that he had regained his composure and concluded that she'd made too much of his odd behavior over the last little while. I see. Observing Rem's relief, Subaru thought his own lack of consideration was even more pathetic. No doubt Rem, who only knew the Subaru of before, thought that his transformation in the seconds after return by death was nothing short of dramatic. The experiences of several days changed Subaru in the span of a single second. Furthermore, on that day, in his own way, Subaru was busy trying to avert his eyes from the gloom in his own heart. He'd put on a disgraceful show at the Royal Selection Conference, had been beaten half to death by Julius at the parade grounds, had created a fatal chasm between himself and Emilia, and having been left behind in the royal capital, had lost the purpose for his existence. He'd been idly spending his time at the Krush residence, sinking deeper into the doldrums as he asked himself what he could do, what he needed to do, without finding any answers. It couldn't be called anything short of ridiculous. Subaru very much thought that now. From Rem's point of view, that uncertainty in Subaru had vanished in a literal blink of an eye. If you couldn't call that a thunderclap out of the blue, what could you call it?
Sorry for making you worry. I'm all right now. I feel like you've had to see me all pathetic and bent out of shape, but I understand finally.
No, to me, time spent thinking about you is time well spent. You understand finally?
Subaru was speaking with unclouded eyes. There was a liveliness to Rem's voice as she replied. She couldn't hide her reserved delight at being able to converse with Subaru like that again. Then Subaru smiled shyly and nodded at the question Rem raised.
I really do feel more than a little sorry for the trouble I caused everyone running around and worrying like that, but I finally know how to put everything in order. Well, no, now that I think about it. I saw it from the start, and people mentioned it to me too. I'm just bad at giving up.
I think that is a marvelous thing about you. Subaru?
Subaru smiled weakly at Rem's soft-spoken reply. Then he looked up at the sky. Its height and breadth gently made his chest feel lighter. The world had probably been looking down at Subaru in frustration all along. But with this, that oppressive time would finally come to an end. The answer had been under his nose all along. No matter where Subaru headed, no matter what challenges he recklessly faced, no matter how much he ran around doing stupid things, she'd followed him without a word of complaint. Yes.
Rem, I've decided.
She stood close enough for him to reach out and touch as he looked straight into her eyes. Her short blue hair fluttered in the wind. Her pale, clear blue eyes held only Subaru within them. Her petite figure was clad in a modified black-themed apron dress. The overly serious way she carried herself projected her nobility and steadfastness. The vivid floral hair ornament delicately added to the loveliness of her small, refined visage.
Yes, Subaru.
Her pink lips formed a small smile. She narrowed her eyes, the benevolence in them piercing right through Subaru. The soft echo of her voice, full of affection, enchanted him. She seemed to be hanging on to his every word.
First, we'll rent a dragon carriage. With the capital in such an uproar, hiring one seems to be rough, but we'll play dirty if we have to. No intro from Anastasia, so it's best to keep this on the up and up if possible.
They needed a fast land dragon with plenty of endurance. If it was friendly on top of that, great. They'd need to keep running. They needed to travel light to keep running without pause, day and night.
A dragon carriage. You say?
Rem cocked her head slightly and echoed Subaru. From the confusion welling in her eyes, Subaru's rush to the conclusion meant his explanation had told her little. But he pretended not to notice Rem's natural misgivings and pointed at the huge front gate.
We'll have to kill some time while we pick out a dragon carriage, so we should go buy some food during the downtime. I'm no good with old-style rations, though. Plain water's better than those things. He'd actually eaten simple rations and preserved foods on field trips and the like back in his old world. The hateful memory had made Subaru brand both as no good. Wait, maybe there's some nice magical power to preserve food here. We managed to make mayonnaise, so maybe we can experiment and find something good.
Subaru?
Sorry. My thoughts started running in a weird direction. What's wrong?
Realizing he'd gone off on a tangent, Subaru righted himself and smiled kindly as he looked at Rem. That smile made Rem go briefly silent. Then she lifted her head, seemingly trying to set aside her doubts.
I'm sorry. I am a poor guesser, so I do not understand what you are trying to do, Subaru. What are?
Right, my bad. Sorry, I didn't realize at all. Just now, I was completely caught up trying to make plans for stuff we've got to do. So embarrassing.
Subaru slapped his knee, grinning in recognition of his mistake.
It took a whole lot of experiences for me to realize a few things, but the answer was obvious a good while ago. A wry smile, a truly wry smile, appeared. He'd tasted bitterness. He'd chewed on his regrets. He'd shed tears over the absurdity and irrationality of it all. He'd been toyed with by a cruel fate. He'd been smeared with the blood of others, dying an absurd number of times. All of it had led to a single answer, one he now keenly understood. Rem.
Calling her name, Subaru slowly stretched a hand toward her. Ree watched his hand, waiting for his next words. Responding to Rem's unspoken request, he put the feelings welling within him into words.
Let's run away together, as far as we can. His defeat at fate's hands was loud and clear.
Pa?
Rem, unable to grasp the meaning of the words spoken to her, let out only a faint gasp from her throat. Subaru, unsurprised at Rem's reaction, shook his head and said,
We will leave the royal capital and head west, that or north. I've heard that we can't get into the empire down south, so it's one of those two. I'm not good with cold, so personally, I vote for west.
Error. Excuse?
It'll be a long journey with no clear end, and I don't think we'll have an easy time just because it's a good chance to start over. Besides, in the first place, if we rent a dragon carriage, I can't see us ever getting a chance to hand it back. What should we do about that, huh? Maybe buy a dragon carriage instead of renting one. He'd left procuring dragon carriages to Rem. Subaru didn't know if they had some rental car-like system in place. He didn't even know where you'd buy one. He figured there had to be some means so that you couldn't just grab one and run, but...
P, please wait.
Subaru was in the middle of that thought when Rem urged him to pause. She kept her palms pointed towards Subaru as a rare expression of nervousness came over her.
Error. What do you mean by run? Subaru, from the way you are speaking right now, you sound as if you are trying to go to a different nation, one that is not Lugunica.
Rem's gaze wandered as if she half doubted her own words. Then her expression changed to an awe. Look as she clapped her hands together.
Since it is you we are talking about, you have another incredible idea, don't you? Something that will aid Lady Emilia and Master Roswaal.
Nothing of the sort, Rem.
Rem seemed to be clinging to the best possible interpretation of the true intent behind Subaru's words. But right in front of the girl who believed this of him, Subaru decisively repudiated that thought.
I told you we'll run away. Even if I stay in the royal capital, I can't do anything. But if I return to the mansion, that won't change the fact that I can't do anything. I understand that now. His powerlessness, his emptiness, the irrationality of the world, these weighed heavily on Subaru. No matter how hard he tried to deny it, the absurd would never leave him. But how light his heart had become now that he had accepted it. Now Subaru was free of the troubles he had endured, almost as if they had never existed. So run away with me, Rem. Every last person's told me that I can't stay here. I didn't want to accept it, so I kept on desperately denying it, but that's right. I'm weak. No one's ever told me I need you. He thought he'd been too full of himself. He thought wrong. He'd been mistaken. He'd gotten carried away. Having arrived in another world and through the power to rewind fate and just the tiniest bit of good fortune, he felt like he'd saved people on two separate occasions, but he'd been wrong. He didn't even possess the power or feelings deserving of being saved by others.
That's not.
No one said it, and I have been told, loud and clear, over and over. No one needs the likes of you. The first time around, Subaru had ignored Emilia's wishes and rushed out of the Krush residence. He didn't listen to Rem's attempt to stop him, courting a massive tragedy as a result. The second time around, he'd been unable to change one iota of the result. Everyone had died again, and through fleeing from reality, he'd caused Rem to lose her life. Again, no one was saved. The third time around brought about the most despicable of all outcomes. He'd gotten even innocent merchants on the roadside involved, offered Rem up to the white whale, and had robbed Emilia of her life with his own hands. Puck had slaughtered the witch cult, but if, after Subaru's death, Puck had indeed destroyed the world as he had proclaimed, the damage was surely greater than any time that had come before. What about the time unrelated to the power of return by death that could not be rewound? When the candidates had assembled at the royal palace, Subaru had dragged down Emilia in epic fashion. Merely by standing at her side, let alone speaking his impertinent words, he'd tarnished her reputation, and his duel to save face had resulted only in even greater humiliation. As a result, he and Emilia had had a falling out, and he had hurt her heart with his emotional arguments, which had been little more than outbursts of anger. Ka-ha-ha-ha-ha! He laughed dryly at the realization. Now that he thought back, it was a masterpiece. When he calmly reflected on his own actions, it was painfully clear that he'd been a pestilence. He wanted to lend Emilia his strength? There had to be people only he could save. There was no doubt everyone was done for if he wasn't there. What thoughtlessness! What arrogance! Yes, what hubris! Subaru's actions had only worsened Emilia's standing. Even so, he betrayed her enormously generous heart, and his foolish undertakings had only dragged Rem with him to her death. Incredible. Just incredible. No doubt everyone knew that would be the result. That was why everyone had told Subaru, you need to behave, don't do anything, your strength isn't required, don't butt in, just go away. Those around him who had told him so knew a great deal about the future. They were very different from Subaru, who ought to have known that he could do nothing, that he understood nothing, that he was able to comprehend nothing. Maybe they were the ones really doing things over? If they aren't, I'm the only one screwing up like this. It was pathetic. There was no one lowlier, more unsalvageable, or more miserable than he. What did you call a man who resigned himself to being laughed at by others and acted so as to make others laugh? You called him a clown. Subaru, who wasn't even aware of the customers pointing at him and laughing, was unworthy of the title. He was just a simple, irredeemable fool. So I've decided to go away. That's best. I know that's best. If someone like me tries to do something, it'll just add one more corpse, and if I'm not lucky, a lot more than one. Courses, courses, courses. Strangers, acquaintances, people precious to him. Important people, people who believed in him. People he wanted to think believed in him. Endless corpses. He'd had it. Why did all those things have to happen to him? He'd suffered so much. Didn't he deserve some reward? Even Subaru knew that the idea that hard work was always rewarded, that any wish with a clear objective could come true so long as you gave it your all, was nothing but a pipe dream. But despite that, was it so wrong to have but one tiny wish to avoid the worst of all worlds? Subaru had been wrong. That was why the results continued to betray his expectations. Let's run away, Rem. You, me, we can't stay here in this country. Subaru had resolved to leave it all behind, flip the bird at everything, and run. And having decided to put so many things behind him as he fled, he wanted to take only one with him, Rem, the girl standing before him. He couldn't bring himself to abandon everything in its entirety. He was afraid of being alone. He was terrified of solitude. Even in that vast world, that world of incomprehensible darkness, knowing that having nothing so that he would lose nothing was the right answer, Subaru couldn't put aside his fear of being all by himself. As the days repeated themselves, Rem had been the only one who'd stayed with Subaru. She'd been right at his side, watching his disgraceful displays, unsightly words and deeds, and off-the-wall way of living. Subaru thought that made her worthy of one final gamble. Each of the 3 times, Subaru had let Rem die. To keep her from dying, he couldn't return to the mansion. Even when he had arrived at the mansion, she had heroically offered up her life along the way in the end. Nor could he say with certainty that he could save her by keeping her at the royal capital. Even if they were spending their time in peace and quiet here, if Rem conveyed news of the crisis at the mansion, Rem would probably rush out of the city. If it came to that, Subaru wouldn't be able to stop her, and she would meet the same fate. He'd lose her again, and Subaru could clearly see how empty he would be without her. If he seriously wanted to save her, he had to get her out of the kingdom.
You are saying all this so suddenly. I do not know what to do.
Rem shook her head a little in the face of Subaru's forceful plea. It wasn't a gesture of rejection. Her expression projected the uncertainty that reigned inside her. Rem couldn't simply accept at face value what Subaru had suddenly said. He had cited far too few facts to make an informed decision. Subaru understood the irrationality of it, but even so, he could speak no further of the circumstances. He no longer knew how much information he could divulge with the witch's evil hands looming. He felt like he'd brush against the witch's curse no matter what he talked about. No matter what he did, he felt like it would lead to more sacrifices to the irrationalities of fate. And if that came to pass, it wouldn't be Subaru who would be sacrificed, but people precious to him. It was a stalemate. He was hemmed in on all sides. Fate had shut off every avenue of escape. Therefore, Subaru had no means left to him but that plea. He was earnestly appealing to Rem's conscience, knowing that it was underhanded in every possible way, knowing that he was using the feelings for Subaru that Rem harbored in her heart.
There's no time. I'm sorry. This is so sudden. Really, I am. I'm sorry from the bottom of my heart, but please choose.
Choose?
Me or everything except for me. Please choose. Subaru hated the situation he'd put her in saying all that and making her suddenly choose based on the little information he'd provided her. But it was also a fact that giving her time to calmly think it over worked against him. He couldn't dismiss the notion that he was using the pressure of her predicament for his own benefit. Only in this situation, giving Rem little time to decide whether to leave Subaru there or not as he pled right before her eyes, did he have a shot at winning this. Or if not winning, then fulfilling a cherished desire more like hope, the selfish hope that Rem, at least, would forgive him for running away. Let's get a dragon carriage and head west. Let's leave Lugudica and go all the way west of Kararagi, was it? Let's buy a little house and live there, just the two of us.
Rapid fire, Subaru began sketching his vision of the future. It was an ordinary, tranquil future, one surely divorced from irrationality and cruelty.
It means using the traveling funds, so I feel bad for Roswaal, but we can just borrow what we need and send the rest back. I'm gonna work hard to help set us up from the start, too. I've never worked at a proper job before, but it'll probably be all right. He was a delinquent who had dropped out of high school with only a middle school graduation under his belt. His work experience in this world consisted of nothing but a stint as an apprentice servant. Furthermore, though he didn't like saying it, his current work as a subordinate was little better than that of a child helping out with the chores. It'd probably be hard doing a real job, but he'd find work, come hell or high water. Compared to pain, suffering, and death, it'd be a walk in the park. The more Subaru thought about it, the more his future opened up. Thinking back to how he'd aimed for a single future, spending day after day courting the worst calamities no matter how hard he tried, it was a happy thing indeed. Even if it's tough, if you're there, I know I'll try hard, even if I'm tired. Just the thought of you waiting for me with a smile when I come home. Even if every last person he left behind blamed him for running away, he figured he could take it if Rem was at his side. So please, I'm begging you, like I've never begged for anything before, please choose me.
Subaru offered his hand to petition her, almost like he was trying to drag a yes out of her.
If you pick me, I'll give you everything I have. Every part of my life will be yours. I'll spend my life for you. I'll live only for you. So please.
Even with Rem standing right in front of him, he couldn't look at her face. He didn't have the courage to see what kind of expression she was making. Courage didn't suit him, not in the tiniest bit. If he did, surely everything would have worked out differently. Cowardly, underhanded, and pathetic as he was, he had nothing left.
Run away with me. Live with me, please. At least let me keep you from dying, he earnestly pled from the bottom of his heart. Putting all his feelings into his parched voice, Subaru felt his heart beat quickly, his breathing grow ragged. Exhaustion from the fierce mental pummeling Subaru had received struck him with fatigue, as if he'd sprinted with all his strength. Rem made no reply. The sounds of the crowd were distant now. It never entered his mind to wonder what other people might think of two people having a conversation like this in public. Rem was everything to him. To Subaru, in that moment, her existence was everything to him.
Unable to endure the silence, Subaru opened his firmly closed eyes to peek at Rem's expression as she stood before him, all the while seized by the fear that it might reveal her answer. In silence, Rem pursed her lips, not realizing he was looking at her. Her expression struggled to remain neutral, but her brow and the corners of her eyes were faintly strained in a way she would not normally permit. Subaru could tell that a vortex of uncertainty, bewilderment, and hesitation swirled within her. The various things Subaru had just said were greatly, powerfully, fiercely shaking her heart. The long battle felt like an eternity. A sense of unease burned Subaru's back, but finally, that time came to an end.
Subaru.
Gently, she called his name with a voice that was full of affection. The instant Subaru heard the tone, the echo of her voice, he was certain his hopes had been answered. Rem had accepted Subaru. She'd forgiven Subaru for being weak. She'd embraced the human being called Subaru Natsuki and everything that came with him. A flood of emotions welled within him. He felt like he'd finally been rewarded. Then Subaru lifted his face.
I cannot run away with you, Subaru. Subaru?
With a very sad face, Rem dashed his hopes.
After all, when we talk about the future, we need to smile, don't we?
With an expression resembling a tearful smile, Rem spoke the words that had once come from Subaru's own mouth.
He'd gambled and he'd lost. When Rem threw his own words back at him with a tearful smile, Subaru's inner self was exhausted, overwhelmed by a feeling that he'd thrown everything into one match and lost. Subaru had hoped that Rem, with her strong dependence on him, just might say yes, that maybe, just maybe, even as he cast everything aside, she might choose him. It was a fleeting dream, a conceited thought. He should have understood that from the start. If his inability to find any worth in himself was the whole reason he'd chosen to run away, what business did he have expecting that? Right now, I might not be smiling, but I mean, if we actually did it, I'm sure I'd be smiling. Yeah, that's right. So,
Even though the matter had already been settled, unconvincing arguments poured out of Subaru's mouth in an attempt to smooth things over. He couldn't think of an effective rebuttal to Rem's words. But if he didn't say something, his desires were over then and there. He might still have a chance to change her mind as long as they kept talking, though that might have been an exercise in wishful thinking. As Subaru clung to that hope, Rem watched him, a faint smile coming over her as she murmured,
I have thought of it as well.
She raised her shapely face up ever so slightly.
After arriving in Kararagi, first we would rent a room at an inn. Though a house is the foundation for building a life, we could not be reckless with the money at our disposal. First, we would need a stable income.
Rem lifted a finger up as she added to the image of the future Subaru had proposed earlier.
Fortunately, I received a proper education due to Master Roswaal's good judgment. Even in Kararari, I believed that finding employment would be a simple matter for me. As for Subaru, you would probably need to settle for physical labor, but perhaps you could work in close proximity to me.
With a little giggle, Rem made light of Subaru's inability to do anything. It was no doubt an accurate assessment of Subaru's worth, as he was still largely ignorant of the culture and technology in that world.
Once our income is stable, we would look for a slightly better place to stay. During that time, you would need to study properly for future employment. It would take about a year before you could do real work, maybe. You can become independent even faster, but only through your own efforts. Subaru.
With that, Rem laid out an unexpectedly brutal studying regimen. When she had instructed him in Ram's place, her method of teaching was gentle, but her criticisms were merciless. He might have grumbled along the way, but he was rather fond of her strictness.
With both of us working, we could save some money, perhaps enough to eventually buy a house. Maybe a store of some sort would be better. Kararagi is a land overflowing with commerce, so there will surely be a way to profit from your eccentric ideas, Subaru.
With an amused clap of her hands, Rem laid out a future that sounded too good to be true. Subaru, too, felt like he could clearly picture the scene playing out in Rem's head. As usual, Subaru would cause her lots of trouble, and she would indulge him. Of course he would feel responsible for that, so he'd end up working hard with plenty of sweat rolling off his brow for sure. That would be nice. An honest living, for her sake and hers alone. How happy a life would that be?
As our work progresses, this is embarrassing, that maybe children, as half demon and half human, they would most likely be very rambunctious. Boy or girl, twins or triplets, they are sure to be very cute children too.
Rem's cheeks reddened as she shyly let her thoughts run a little further ahead. She counted on her fingers one by one, and just as the number reached a terrifying 10, she continued.
It would not be all fun, and I do not think it would all go as well as I imagine. Perhaps we would have no sons and only daughters, and you might not be able to feel proud of your family.
Rem?
But, even when the children get big enough to be mean to you, I will always be on your side. Subaru. We would be famous with the locals as the always happily married couple, and slowly spend our days together, growing old together.
Rem?
Subaru, I am sorry to say this, but if possible, I would ask you to please let me pass away before you. I would like to lie upon a bed with you holding my hand, surrounded by our children and grandchildren, while I say, I was happy, and you all would send me off.
He couldn't hold up his head. The future Rem was portraying with her words was quietly, gently wounding Subaru's heart.
That would be a happy way to end my life?
If you
Listening to the bittersweet future Rem had refused was like having an irrepressible itch deep inside his chest that made him want to scratch himself raw. By the time Subaru finished listening, there was nothing left filling his heart but a pathetic, indescribable storm of emotion. His throat trembled. Something heavy sank deep inside his lungs. His head hurt. He shook his head to try and ignore the relentless heat filling the depths of his eyes.
If you thought it through, then she could run away with Subaru as far as their feet could take them.
Subaru, if you could smile while wishing for that future, I truly believe I could be happy after a life like that.
But filled with a sadness that exceeded even Subaru's, the smiling girl did not answer his plea. Dumbfounded, Subaru stared at that small, painful smile when he finally understood. No matter how much he clung to hope, he could not get Rem to change her mind. He had truly, utterly lost the gamble, and he had no recourse. A sense of fatigue assailed him, as if he were carrying something very heavy on his shoulders. He was so disheartened that he could collapse on the spot. Subaru barely managed to avoid doing so, covering his face with his hands as he despaired.
Rem had refused to go with him. That meant he was out of ways to save her. If he stayed by her side to protect her, all that awaited her upon their return to the mansion was a cruel future, an unchangeable tragedy, and fate's pitiless dead end. Then perhaps it would be best to leave Rem behind and run away by himself? If he did so, he could not escape loneliness, but he could at least flee from the despair in front of him. Of course, the fate of the people in and around the mansion would not change whether or not he was present. Subaru would simply be covering his eyes and ears, pretending not to know, spared from seeing reality for himself. In that moment, Subaru was so desperate for something to cling to that this paltry salvation would do. But even if he accepted that himself, would there be any salvation at all? Whether Subaru was challenging his foes, fleeing into madness, or putting everything on the line, fate had not cut him the slightest slack. What then could he do?
Subaru, that you thought of running away with me, that you thought of living your life with me, thrills me to the bottom of my heart, but it will not do.
Even having spurned the hand Subaru had offered, Rem's cheeks were still flush from the feelings swirling within her. She herself knew that they could flee, and, eventually, make that fantasy a reality. She craved it. She'd stated firmly that the tale was a happy one, and yet Rem had rejected it, because…
I mean, if we did run away right now, I am certain that I would be leaving behind the Subaru I love most.
What was Rem saying? He didn't get it. Trembling, Subaru lifted up his face and looked at her with blank eyes. Rem was giving him a small, sad smile, but even so, her eyes projected her firm sentiments. Subaru felt overwhelmed by her gaze as she continued.
Subaru, please tell me what has happened.
He shook his head. He could not. If he did that, Rem would die.
If you cannot talk about it, then please trust me. I will manage somehow.
He shook his head. He could not. If he left it at that, Rem would die.
But at the very least, can we go back now? If you settle down and think about it more calmly, you might be able to find a different answer.
He shook his head. He could not. If he waited, everyone would die.
I've worried already. I've thought already. I've suffered already. That's why I gave up. No one believed Subaru. No one expected anything from him. If he told anyone he'd do something, they'd spoon-feed him his own foolishness. He'd ignored that, brushed it off, seen his own many stupidities, and thus arrived at his current state. To Subaru, that time, that wear and tear on his heart was...
It is easy to give up. However,
Suddenly, Rem voiced a rebuttal to Subaru's words of weakness. It is easy to give up. The instant the words entered his ears, a jolt of comprehension rushed through Subaru's whole body. It was as if a bolt of lightning had struck the crown of his head. Something he couldn't put into words exploded inside his chest, and every pore of his body felt like he'd been set on fire.
It's easy to give up.
Subaru?
Don't tell me that.
Subaru clenched his teeth, rasping with resentment at a perplexed Rem. It's easy to give up. That's a bad joke. You think it's a simple thing to abandon your goal and run away empty-handed? Like hell it is.
There's no way it's easy to give up.
Subaru's throat trembled from the unbearably dark emotions exploding within him. Surprised by Subaru's angry outburst, Rem seemed to shrink. Even pedestrians traveling along the royal capital's main street were wondering what was up as they shifted their eyes to the enraged Subaru. Heedless of the offended gazes, Subaru glared only at Rem, standing before him.
I didn't do anything, I didn't think of anything. I abandoned everything, without a care, threw it all away just like that, and gave up. Is that what you think? The decision was killing him. He cried tears of blood and yelled enough to rip his throat apart, and still he had gained nothing, knowing that he had made his decision, giving up on everything. Knowing that he had made his decision, giving up on everything. That was the only conclusion he could put into words, but just how many sacrifices had to be made for him to reach that conclusion? He wouldn't let anyone diminish that. Giving up wasn't easy at all. Thinking you can fight, that you can manage somehow, that's way easier. But I couldn't manage somehow. I had no choice. All the paths were blocked except for giving up. Fate was mocking Subaru, for every path available to him ended in a dead end. No matter how much he fought, how much he stood tall, plotted, schemed, begged, or even ran away, it was no longer possible for him to have it all. Even the people he wanted to save had slapped his hand away. He was supposed to keep trying. Then, who could tell Subaru that it was too soon to give up? If someone had been through the same experience, the same suffering, the same hell, would that person be able to say such a thing? If I could do anything, I died.
He truly wanted to do something, to help people, to save people, to keep them from being stolen away. But he couldn't. The world wouldn't let him. Everything during those repeated days had come back around to bite him again. That's why Subaru had...
Subaru.
As Subaru hung his head, drained of emotion, his voice petering out, Rem called to him. Subaru's ears were ringing heavily. The pathetic revelation of his unsightly true feelings left him unable to even look her in the face. And to that miserable, unsalvageable, hopeless man who had challenged fate and lost, she said,
It is easy to give up. However,
Rem repeated once more the phrase that had sent Subaru into a rage just before. Sensing something almost incomprehensible in her words, Subaru lifted his face dumbfounded. Why won't she understand? Why, after all this, couldn't she comprehend Subaru's anguish? The gloom, the dissatisfaction, the wounds on what seemed like every corner inside his heart.
it does not suit you, Subaru. Subaru.
It all vanished as Rem stared directly into Subaru's black eyes and spoke. Rem stated those words as if she truly believed them, as if they represented some kind of absolute truth.
I do not understand what painful thoughts, what knowledge is making you suffer. Subaru, I believe I cannot belittle it by saying that I understand. But even so, there is one thing that even I recognize. And that is, you are not someone who can give up on things before they're done, Subaru.
To the man lost in sorrow before her, who'd cast away everything, who had said he was giving up but a moment before, Rem said such a thing without shame, without fear, without hesitation.
I know this. When it is a future you want, you smile when you talk about it, Subaru.
To the man who had spoken to her of running away to a world that was no doubt warm, peaceful, and tranquil, with guilt and regret on his face, Rem spoke plainly, without any disappointment.
I know this. I know that you are a man who does not give up on the future, Subaru.
This, Rem declared to a young man hanging his head, seemingly gritting his teeth. There was only sincerity in her eyes. They conveyed nothing but trust to him. Subaru was overwhelmed by that powerful, intense light. After all, Rem was wrong about him. So wrong, this was a veritable farce. Her statements valued the human being called Subaru far too highly. He didn't know how proud and noble the Subaru in her eyes must have been. But the real Subaru was nothing so fine a person as that. Spouting weakness, crushed from adversity, lamenting his own smallness and pathetic misery, defeated and beaten so hard that he was running away. That was Subaru Natsuki.
I'm not that kind of person.
I am not mistaken. Lady Emilia, Sister, Master Roswaal, Miss Beatrice, and everyone else, I know you have not given up on them, Subaru.
She refuted him in a strong tone, but she was wrong. He'd thrown away all of them.
I gave up. I can't take them with me. My hands are too small. Everything falls out of them. Then I have nothing left.
No, that is not so. Subaru, you are.
Just how far would Rim go in denying that Subaru had given up? Why, after he had suffered such humiliation, did she so deny that he was in the wrong? Just what did she see in Subaru? It was so disturbing that he couldn't take it anymore. Just what is it you're trying to say? What? Do you think you know about me?
He vented the flames smoldering inside his chest in an incandescent rage. Subaru shouted angrily, slamming a fist into the wall right beside him. With a hard sound, his knuckles broke. When he waved his fist around, blood splattered onto the wall.
This is all I am. I have high hopes even though I'm powerless. I have all these dreams even though I'm dumb. I keep trying even though I can't do anything. Everyone had at least one thing they could do right, and everyone pushed that one thing as far as they could to find a place suited to them. But Subaru Natsuki didn't even have that. The lofty heights he yearned for were far above his station. I hate myself.
Faced with the truth that he'd smiled frivolously in an attempt to hide, making light of things as he kept running from them, never facing them seriously, for the first time Subaru admitted what he really felt. More than anyone, Subaru Natsuki hated himself.
I'm always nothing but talk. I'm full of myself, even though I can't do anything. I'm worse than useless, but I'm still a world-class complainer. Who the hell do I think I am? How dare I live such a shameful life this long? Right? Because he was unable to raise himself higher, he had tried to bring others down. Because he wouldn't admit he was inferior to others, he tried to find fault in everyone else to protect his banal, paper-thin pride. I'm empty. I've got nothing inside me. Of course I am. Yeah, it's obvious. There's no question. Until I came here, until I met all of you, do you know what I was doing? Before he'd fallen into another world, what was he doing in his former world except living out his idle, boring, ordinary, unchanging days one at a time? I wasn't doing anything.
He'd wallowed in idleness, slumbered in indolence, spent his days far removed from studying and effort. It wasn't that he had given up on himself, but rather, he'd held on to the convenient idea that if the time came, he could just roll up his sleeves and do it.
I didn't do anything. I didn't do one little thing. With all that time to do it, with all that freedom, I should have done lots of stuff, but I didn't do any of it. And this is the result. The result is the man I am now. If he'd properly used the time he had, even Subaru would surely have achieved something. But in reality, he had grandly squandered and wasted the time allotted to him, and as a result, he had gained nothing, and nothing had come from it. That was why, now that he actually wanted from the bottom of his heart to accomplish something, he lacked the strength, intelligence, and skill to achieve any of it. I'm powerless, talentless, and all of it is because of my rotten personality. I want to achieve something when I haven't done anything before. Conceited doesn't even begin to describe it. I was lazy and imposed on other people. I wasted my whole life away. I killed you. He was unsalvageable. He was hopeless. Even if he'd redone it all from birth, he'd probably go down the exact same path, waste his time in the exact same way, arrive there with the same feelings, and experience the same regrets. His rotten personality wouldn't change. A shallow human nature was the only one suited to the human being called Subaru Natsuki. That fact would never change. That's right, my personality hasn't... I thought I could live here, but not a single thing's changed about me. That old man saw right through me, didn't he? When he'd remained in the royal capital, Wilhelm had instructed him in the sword at the Krusch residence. Watching Subaru be knocked down time and time again, all beat up while challenging him over and over, the old man had nonetheless seen through it all. During those days of training, the old man had spoken of those who wield the sword, but he had shaken his head and said, "There is little point lecturing someone about what it takes to become stronger when he has already abandoned the choice to do so." At the time, Subaru hadn't understood what Wilhelm was saying, so he denied the old man's words, even though he knew deep down exactly what they meant. It's not like I really thought I'd get stronger or I'd be able to do anything. I just went through the motions. I was just a poser trying to justify myself. Emilia had abandoned him after he had put on a more miserable display than any other at the royal selection site. Unable to bear being viewed as such by those around him, he tried to protect himself by adopting the mantle of a hard worker where those gazes could see. His behavior was the simple product of his search for a suitable excuse. I'm changing myself. He should have known that the thought was itself proof that nothing had changed. I wanted to say I couldn't help it. I wanted other people to say it couldn't be helped. That's all it was. That's the only reason I pretended to put myself on the line like that. Even when you were helping me study, I was just putting on a show to cover up the embarrassment. I'm a small, underhanded, filthy guy down to the bone, always worrying about what other people think of me, and none of that's ever changed. His bluffs had been stripped away, and the hubris underneath had crumbled. Once his thin shell was shattered, his vainglorious heart not wanting to be thought of badly by others, and his ego asserting that he wasn't wrong, poured out. Even I knew. I understood all of it was my fault, really. If he could yell that it was somebody else's fault, that there was some reason for it, it was easier. He wouldn't need to look at who he truly was. If he kept his facade intact, he'd never have to look at what was on the inside. He wouldn't have to look at his ugly self. He wouldn't have others see it. Though he was weak, selfish, and all talk, he wished to be loved nonetheless. I'm the worst. I hate me.
Subaru was short of breath after venting all the gloomy darkness tearing him up inside. He'd let himself have it with all the filthy, corrupt things in him since coming to that other world. No, those dark things had been in him long before in his old world. His nature as a human made even him want to puke, even though he had spewed it all out. The deep feelings in his chest only soured further. Weren't you supposed to feel a little better after you vented something pent up inside? On top of not feeling the slightest bit better, he realized with crystal clarity just how foolish he was. The shame seething inside him made him want to die then and there, and his weakness in exposing so much filth, thinking of nothing beyond his own concerns, was the stupidest thing of all. With Rem standing right there, still believing in him, Subaru had tried to sully and stain the beautiful picture in front of her sparkling eyes, exposing it as a fraud. And now, after all that, he was more concerned with his own standing than with her. That was it in a nutshell? Truly accepting and recognizing the corrupt, flawed parts of himself that he hated didn't mean things were going to instantly improve. If anything, the depth and darkness of the chasm within him underlined just how incorrigible he was, robbing him even of his will to live. The true character of Subaru Natsuki did not merit pity. As Subaru sank to the lowest depths of his filthy ego, still, the blue-haired girl.
I know this. I know that Subaru is someone with the courage to reach out, even with impenetrable darkness all around him.
Even then, Rem would not forsake him.
Her absolute love, her inviolate trust, chafed upon Subaru like nothing before. Having berated himself so much, having divulged so much of the ugliness in his heart, having divulged so much of the ugliness in his heart. Having confessed that he was a complete fraud, an unsalvageable piece of garbage. Why did she look at Subaru with such affectionate eyes?
I love it when you stroke my head, Subaru. I feel connected to you when your hand passes through my hair.
With Subaru fallen into silence, Ren began to express something unexpected in a soft, quiet voice.
I love your voice, Subaru. I feel my heart getting warmer from every single word. I love your eyes, Subaru. They're usually quite sharp, but I like how they become soft when you're being kind to someone.
Subaru said nothing as Rem continued, showering him with her words.
I love your fingers, Subaru. They're very pretty for a boy's, but when they hold my hand, I always think to myself, they really are a boy's fingers. They are slender and strong. I love how you walk, Subaru. When someone is beside you, you always check once in a while to make sure you really are side by side. I love that you walk that way.
His heart was screaming. While Rem wove those words, Subaru's chest cried out.
Stop it.
I love your face when you sleep, Subaru. You are as defenseless as a baby. Your eyelashes are just a little bit long. Your cheeks are so gentle when I touch them. And even if I touch your lips to tease you, you don't notice. I love it so much that it makes my chest hurt.
Why? Why was she still talking? Why was she still able to toss out such compliments at Subaru, the useless fool that he was?
You said that you hated yourself, Subaru, so I wanted you to know that you have so much good in you.
None of that is real. Riemann was looking at a convenient illusion. The real Subaru wasn't that kind of person. The real him was filthier than that. His genuine self was ugly, the exact opposite of the one she viewed so favorably. You just don't understand. I know more about myself than anyone else.
You only know about you, Subaru. How much do you know about the Subaru I see?
Reflexively, Subaru raised his voice, but Rem's shout was even louder than his own. Subaru was shocked. It was the first time she'd raised her voice since they'd arrived here. The shock made his breath catch in his throat. At long last, he realized that Rem's eyes, dutifully maintaining their neutral expression, had large teardrops welling in them. Of course, hearing Subaru's confession had hurt her. Of course, listening to his extreme masochism had brought pain to her kind heart. Yet even so, she believed in Subaru. Rem knew all the horrible things within him that he had told her about, and she believed in Subaru despite them.
Why do you? So much. I'm weak, puny. I'm running away. Even now, I'm running away just like I did before. So why? Why do you believe in a pathetic, unreliable guy drowning in his weakness like me? If I can't believe in myself, how can you?
Because you're my hero.
When those words of unconditional, infinite trust hit him, Subaru's heart quietly trembled. No matter what awful conditions piled atop one another, no matter what flaws he might have, that one sentence was infused with the hope that he would come running and chase evil away. And far too late, finally Subaru realized it. ReZero by Tape Nagatsuki, produced by Six-Tail Novel with Artail. AI. If you are interested in creating your own audiobook like this, visit Artail AI and claim free premium with code ARTAIL.
He was wrong. He thought wrong. He had been so wrong. He thought that Rim was the only one who would allow Subaru to fall as far as he needed to, that no matter how weak, pathetic, and humiliated he was, she'd forgive him, and he'd made a mistake. It had been an error, a lethal degree of foolishness. Rem was the only one who would never allow Subaru to give in. Everyone had told Subaru that he didn't have to do anything, that he should just behave himself. They had said that they expected nothing from him and that his actions were futile. But it was Rem who would not permit Subaru to be weak. She was the only one who had kept saying, "Stand up, don't give up, save everyone." No one expected anything from Subaru, but she had refused to abandon him even when he had abandoned him, even when he had abandoned himself, nor would she accept his giving up. Such was the spell that Subaru Natsuki had cast upon her.
In that gloomy forest, a world where I had lost myself, a world where I could only lash out without thinking, you came and saved me. When I woke and was unable to move, when Sister was exhausted from having used too much magic, you stood up and faced the demon beasts as a decoy so that we could escape. You had no chance of winning, and your life was truly in danger, but even so, you survived. And when you returned to my arms, you were warm. When you woke up, you smiled and said the words I most wanted to hear, at the time I most wanted to hear them, and you were the person I most wanted to hear them from.
One by one, she enumerated the spell that Subaru had cast upon her. Those spells had bound her deeply kind heart with the chains called trust, and these firmly bound her until that very moment.
On that fiery night, when I lost everything except Sister, time stopped for me, never to move again.
Rem gazed squarely at Subaru as she spoke of a fragment of her terrible past. Her gaze was infused with intimacy that had not wavered to even the slightest degree.
My heart had stopped, frozen in time, but you softly melted it and gently made it move again. Do you know how much you saved me in that instant, on that morning? You can't possibly know how happy I was, Subaru.
That's why I believe in you. No matter how much you might suffer, no matter how much things seem to be going against you, even if no one else in the whole world believes in you, even if you cannot believe in yourself, I believe in you, Subaru.
As Rem spoke, she took a step forward, closing the distance. They were close enough to touch. Subaru, hanging his head, did not move as Rem reached out with both arms, wrapping them around his neck. Even though there was very little strength in the pull, the unresisting Subaru could not avoid her embrace. Though Subaru was taller, Rem held his head to her chest, and he heard her voice from directly above as she said,
The Subaru who saved me is a real hero.
From the slippery sensation on his forehead, he knew she had brushed it with her lips. Heat spread from where she'd touched him. Incomprehensible emotions welled up deep inside Subaru's chest. Blood flowed through his unmoving limbs. The static filling his skull began to clear thin.
No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't save anyone.
I'm here. The Rem you saved is right here, Subaru. Subaru.
I'm empty. There's nothing inside me. No one will listen to me.
I'm here. If they are Subaru's words, I want to hear whatever they might be.
No one expects anything from me. No one trusts me. I hate myself.
I love you, Subaru.
The hand that touched his cheek was hot. Her eyes, gazing at Subaru from up close, were moist. That look, everything about her, made him accept that she was truly sincere.
You're fine with a guy like me? He'd tried over and over, redone over and over, and he had nothing to show for it. Everyone died. His hand never reached them. He'd let everyone die. His thoughts were inadequate. He was empty, powerless, dumb, late to act, a blockhead dragged around by his desire to protect someone. Was he really good enough for her?
I'm fine with you, Subaru. I don't want it to be anyone else.
If he, who could not believe in himself, had someone who had faith in him, could Subaru Natsuki fight? He didn't have to give up on fighting fate.
If you really are that empty, if you have nothing, if you cannot forgive yourself, let's start over, here and now.
Begin? We?
Just like how you made time move again for me, we can make the time that stopped for you move again, right now.
He had taken his regret and shame at his past of achieving nothing, his days of doing nothing, his hours spent in waste and idleness, and tried to give up. Rem smiled at this Subaru, stating,
Let us start over from here. From step 1. No, from 0. If you find it difficult to walk alone, I shall support you. Let us divide the load and support each other as we walk. You said that to me on that morning, yes?
"So let's laugh, hug each other, and talk about tomorrow," he had said. Leaning on each other, supporting each other as they walked, he had said,
Please show me the best in you, Subaru.
he'd shown her nothing but the worst in him for the longest while. After all, it was Subaru himself who had cast the indelible spell upon her. It was his duty to take responsibility and see it through.
Rem.
Yes?
When he called her name, she quietly responded. He lifted his face. He looked straight ahead. He gazed into Rem's eyes. Softly, gently, they awaited the reply from Subaru's lips. So he wanted to be the Subaru Natsuki she loved so much.
I like Emilia.
Yes.
Seemingly knowing all along, Rem smiled and nodded at Subaru's confession. He knew full well how cruel he was being to that smile, that gentleness, as he continued.
I want to see Emilia's smile. I want to be in her future as a help to her. Even if she told me I'm in the way, not to come back, I want to be by her side.
Now that he'd accepted Rem's feelings, he again voiced the feeling that remained unchanged inside him. But the way he felt it was different from before.
The idea that she'd put up with anything from me just because I liked her was pretty arrogant, huh? Even if she doesn't get it right now, that's fine. Right now, I want to save Emilia. If there's a future of pain and suffering coming for her, I want to bring her to a future where everyone can smile. So he offered his hand to Rem right at his side and asked, "Will you help me?"
He knew it was an underhanded way to respond to the feeling she had offered to him. He knew he was using her emotions, but it was that Subaru, the Subaru who would not give up on the future of those precious to him whom she loved.
I can't do anything by myself. I come up short in everything. I don't have the confidence to just walk straight ahead. I'm so weak, fragile, and puny, so. Will you lend me a hand? Help keep me on the straight and narrow when I take a wrong turn.
You are a terrible person, Subaru. Right after you dump a girl, you ask such a thing?
Hey, it's pretty tough for me to ask someone who turned down a once-in-a-lifetime proposal of mine, you know?
Rem was unable to hold back a little sigh at Subaru's weak chuckle. They smiled at each other for a while. Then Rem straightened up, elegantly grasped the hem of her skirt, and in a display of perfect courtesy, she said,
If this will bring a future where Subaru, my hero, can smile, then I humbly accept.
Yeah, you just watch. You'll have a front row seat.
Rem took the hand Subaru had offered as they exchanged their vows. She let out a small ah as Subaru drew her close, burying her petite body in his chest. He was grateful that there existed a girl so soft, so warm, and who liked him so much.
The man you fell in love with is going to be the coolest hero there ever was.
It was hot within her breast. As Subaru embraced Rem, she buried her face in his chest, hiding her expression. Her breathing was hot. Her forehead and cheeks were hot as she rubbed them against him, but the tears flowing from her eyes were probably the hottest of all.
Even then, Subaru could not like himself. He still hated himself, but a girl had told Subaru she liked him. If there was a girl who could like him just as he was, Emilia was watching. Rem was watching. He could not yield.
The tale of Subaru Natsuki would begin anew. His life in another world would start over. From zero. Chapter 6: The Card That's Been Dealt. The room was silent but filled with a strange sense of tension. Feeling that tension on his skin, Subaru moistened his parched lips with his tongue, grateful that arrangements for the first step of the scenario were in place. To Subaru, each and every face now present was absolutely indispensable. After all, he had no strength of his own. Lacking ability and manpower, all he could do by himself was to die in vain as he had done to that point.
Now I can finally understand why you have gathered us here and delayed my supper.
Rioiwi? To be honest, Fairy still has some doubts, meow. I mean, how does such a clumsy boy get that look in his eyes all of a sudden?
With an expression as casual as his tone, Ferris kept his guard up as he gazed at Subaru. He was brimming with a willingness to defend his lord from any danger. In contrast to Ferris, Wilhelm kept his silence as he sat to Krusch's left. Wearing his sword on his hip, the aged swordsman closed his eyes, with only his refined martial spirit hovering about him. There was no trace remaining of the warmth with which he had greeted them upon their return from the lower city. Now, he was wholly immersed in his role as a man wielding his sword for his master, Krusch, rather than for himself. Subaru was meeting Krusch and her retainers in the reception room of her residence, a place of which Subaru had few good memories. Twice in the past he had endured bitter hardships there. He was meeting with Krusch, Ferris, and Wilhelm. That much was the same as before, but there was something different this time.
It feels somewhat uncomfortable to be back so soon after my first visit. I fully expect that Mr. Natsuki will say something to sweep away such misgivings.
The blond man of delicate features, defined by his comical beard, commented with a chuckle. This was Russell Fellow, a representative of the Merchants Guild who possessed great influence in the royal capital. Subaru lightheartedly slumped a little at Russell's apparent diversion.
Rem's calling one more person over right now, so please wait just a little longer. It isn't guaranteed my guest is coming, but it's a good bet.
I await a prompt arrival. Incidentally, may I inquire as to your evidence for this good bet?
Russell didn't even blink in the face of Subaru's presumptuous statement. Subaru's lips twisted as he faced off against a real merchant with a head, mouth, and tongue superior to his own.
It's a simple story. The person I invited is sensitive to the smell of money, or so I heard them say personally. If that's true, there's no doubt. That was true for you as well, wasn't it, Russell?
My, you certainly have me there.
Russell put a hand to his forehead, seemingly indicating that Subaru had scored a point on him. Of course, even Subaru wasn't blithe enough to take the gesture at face value. He was well aware of the danger posed by the narrow tightrope he planned to walk. The rope was just about set to be tied on both ends. The crossing was yet to come. Subaru would do it, supported by the power of borrowed courage. A few minutes later, the door opened and a lone girl, Rem, appeared.
I am sorry to have kept you all waiting.
That's okay!
Subaru brought up his right thumb with a wink as she walked to his side and leaned her face close to his ear.
She said that she would be slightly delayed, but that she would definitely come.
That's so! All right! Good work, Rem!
With that, preparations for Subaru's tightrope performance were complete. Before arriving at the negotiating table, he'd prepared the argument he would use to move the deal in the direction he desired. Subaru's memories and experiences in this new world had led him to a single answer.
Apparently, the last participant will arrive slightly late, but all the actors will be on the stage. No point waiting any further. Should we start?
Subaru's statement brought a change in the air and various reactions from others in the room. Krusch made a thin smile. Ferris strongly pursed his lips. Wilhelm maintained his silence, his expression unchanging even then. Russell slowly sank into his chair. Seeing their reactions, Subaru took a deep breath and calmed his emotions. He could feel his own heart pounding rapidly. His blood circulated throughout his body. The deep anxiety simultaneously residing in his head made everything before his eyes seem to dim. But Rem, right beside Subaru, gently touched his sleeve in an effort to put him at ease.
Subaru!
She wasn't holding his hand, nor was she asserting her own existence. That little act of consideration was very Rem-like. The sense of relief enveloping him was as if 10,000 cavalry were riding to his aid. Rem was watching. He could not disappoint.
Okay.
Subaru hid his fears behind an impetuous smile and challenged the first wall. He needed to thread the eye of a needle, both to get to a happy end and to take one step closer to becoming a hero. For the sake of the girl who believed in him, the girl who told him she liked him. Just as Subaru lifted his spirits and faced forward, Krush raised a finger and spoke.
Subaru Natsuki, there is something I wish to confirm. I would hear, from your own lips, the purpose of this gathering.
As she sat, she raised a hand and rested her chin against it as her sagacious gaze landed on Subaru. Even though she knew full well the answer to her question, her posture showed no sign of softness that would allow Subaru to say so.
Now that he had failed time and time again, he understood. The game was on before he had even spoken a single word. Of course, what I want is...
So Subaru made a grandiose gesture, smiling powerfully to keep himself from being cowed by Krush's rapier-like gaze and repeating his earlier failures.
A negotiation so that the Emilia camp and the Krush camp can become allies on equal terms.
He thus began to challenge the first of many obstacles standing in his way.
The exchange with Rem along Main Street had made me decide to restart in a true sense. This was my sincere answer to Rem, who told me she believed in me even after I'd bared everything inside my heart. Thanks to that, I gained a clear awareness of what I had to do. There's way too many walls I have to climb over to get there, huh?
The sheer number of the obstacles standing in their way didn't change the fact that they were one move away from checkmate. Subaru scratched his head as if he was trying to put his thoughts in order.
But I've still got to do something. Will you help me, Rem?
Yes, if that is what you desire. Subaru?
Rem readily nodded, even after Subaru opened up to her. The same trust hovered in Rem's eyes as before. They lit two fires inside Subaru, courage and a sense of duty. Subaru no longer held any thought of hiding from Rem his own humiliation and panic at having his hands tied. After all, he'd half-bawled his eyes out while venting every complex he had. Rem, too, had revealed truths that had raged within her. In a true sense, Subaru and Rem were now friends for life. And because Subaru had set his heart on something, his head remained remarkably clear.
First, let's double-check the time we have left. If we head back now, that'll be just under an hour. And then... As previously established, the time limit until the witch cult caused upheaval in the Mathers domain was 5 days. Or rather, to be precise, we had a grace period of only 4.5 days. I also needed to consider the sealing of the highway during that time. In reality, I had only 2 days to prepare. And those 2 days are full of unavoidable problems to deal with. The number and nature of the barred gates we had to bust through put previous sets of loops to shame. Clearing any of them alone was hopeless. A fist large enough to smash through the lot of them was required. The first problem was, naturally, the witch cult. If we didn't stop the fanatics under Pateljuice's command, there was no way to save anyone at the mansion, let alone the residents of the village. The second was, though the killer and means had been varied, Rem's certain death. Even if Rem went with me, fate would invariably lead her to her death. The first time she died far from where I could see, and I had been despondent when she was lost to me before my very eyes the second and third times. It was no exaggeration that the shock was what had driven me down the path of giving up entirely. The third problem was that Emilia's death would trigger an indiscriminate rampage by Puck, the Great Spirit. Thinking back, I deemed the possibility that Puck had been the cause of my death on all 3 loops to be very high. When I considered my icy demises from the first time around through the third, I was almost certain of it. All those walls were formidable, but all 3 had to be grappled with, or else the future world I wanted to live in would be lost. That would mean betraying the image of the hero who Rem believed in. Whole bunch of
Subaru murmured under his breath, underlining the depth of the problem. Rem, watching Subaru as he sank into thought, made no reply to his murmur, nor had Subaru been looking for one. Subaru knew that she was simply waiting for the words that had to follow. She was waiting for the best judgment of how she might contribute greatest to the hero she loved the most. That was the present Rem's reason for existing and her ultimate means of expressing her love.
With Rem silently watching me, I used my limited time to search my memories for any clue, any way to break out of the trap of limited time. My head tied itself into knots. My mind was on fire. Neither my flesh nor my abilities could live up to those current ideals. Think, Remember, to not let my death that third time be in vain, to not let the will of the girl I'd let die that third time be lost in vain, my mind assembled everything that had happened during that third finished world into one heavy pile. The people I'd met, the conversations I'd had, partings, encounters, anger, madness, sadness, despair, recovery, and there's a possibility?
Suddenly, something little more than a single option rose up in the back of his mind. Each of the threads was weak, so fragile that tying them together threatened to make them collectively snap. They seemed far too unreliable to rest his hopes upon. But he was all in. It was worth a shot.
Rem, we need to talk. I have a few things I want to ask you.
Yes?
Subaru sought Rem's cooperation in drafting the plan that he'd only just thought of in his head.
Now that Emilia's participating in the royal selection, it looks like the witch cult is gonna move. If they go after Emilia, there'll no doubt be harm to the mansion and the village. I want to stop that.
The witch cult.
A grave look came over Rem's eyes the instant she heard the words. But as Rem nodded at Subaru's words, her self-control held those emotions in check.
Master Roswaal also has concerns that the witch cult might make a move. Though I do not know the details, I believe that he has studied the matter and drawn up countermeasures.
But that's not going to be enough. In fact, I didn't really know what countermeasures he'd taken against the witch cult. I didn't know if they hadn't been executed or if they had just proven ineffective. Either way, whatever pre-existing preparations Roswaal had set weren't up to the task, and I knew that hell would come to pass without fail. Now that I knew that future, I had to secure the power to protect the lives at the mansion and the village without relying on Roswaal. I'm pretty sure the witch cult is going to come in a quick, decisive battle. Rem, what does the mansion have to fight with?
This is a difficult thing to tell you, but the possibility Master Roswaal is absent from the mansion is quite high. He had planned to visit an important associate within his domain upon his return from the royal capital.
Based on Rem's prevaricating reply, the situation was the same as last time. Roswaal wasn't there. The only people at the mansion at present were Emilia, Ram, and Beatrice. Only 3 people, and one of them was Beatrice. I was deeply suspicious that the uncooperative girl would willingly engage the witch cult in battle. That made me recall the exchange between Beatrice and me the last time around, if only a brief one. I remembered that I'd asked Beatrice to kill me. I remembered Beatrice's face, turning eyes toward me like that of a child whose hopes had been betrayed. Right now, I've got to set that aside.
Subaru somehow brushed off the girl's tearful gaze and faced Rem once more.
So that leaves 2 people to fight. Even if you and I go back there, we'd just be 2 drops against a bucket.
As the majority of the main residence's fighting strength rests with Master Roswaal's personal abilities, I cannot deny it. If Frederica was still with us, it might be a different story, but...
Rem lowered her gaze as she ruefully invoked the name of a former co-worker at the mansion. Subaru patted her shoulder in consolation as he mentally filled the gaps in his own understanding. There was no point speaking any further of the mansion's available combat strength. Therefore, the next issue was the main one.
Rem!
Subaru sat up straight and stared at Rem. Then, as Rem, detecting that the atmosphere had changed, lifted her face and looked at him, he said,
Please tell me what Roswaal ordered you to stay in the royal capital to do.
Subaru thought her expression was dubious, or perhaps surprised that he had gone for an unguarded opening. However, Rem's reaction thoroughly defied Subaru's expectations.
Yes, as you wish, Subaru.
Rem nodded to Subaru as a small smile came over her, as if she was happy from the bottom of her heart. A single tear rolled down from the corner of her eye.
An alliance, you say?
He was now in the reception room at the Krusz residence, Krusz murmured, with all eyes falling upon Subaru as he answered her question concerning the goal of the meeting. She lowered her head, falling into thought briefly before shifting her gaze from Subaru to Rem. Rem quietly deduced the meaning of her probing gaze and slowly shook her head.
In accordance with Master Roswaal's instructions, I have proposed nothing. This is something Subaru arrived at by himself.
I do not doubt your loyalty. However, I see.
The face Truce made seemed to indicate that she understood even if she did not exactly accept it.
Then should I take this to mean the right to engage in these negotiations has shifted from Rem to you, Subaru Natsuki?
Yeah, that's what it amounts to. Roswaal was a real jerk with how roundabout he set this up, though. With an exaggerated sigh, I expressed my personal thoughts as my clown-faced employer floated into the back of my mind. Secret orders concerning the royal capital had been kept from me, handed down to Rem alone. Roswaal had strictly instructed Rem not to reveal the details to me so long as I did not realize that fact for myself. It's not like it wasn't bothering me a little from the start. In the first place, it's plain as day that our side is short on manpower, so he'd leave Rem in the capital without a set plan. Rem, the one from the mansion who'd be most missed. There's no way. I really should have realized that earlier.
Of course, the cover story was that Roswaal couldn't take responsibility for healing and repaying the man who'd saved his own domain from crisis without at least a single person to look after him.
But I don't think that eccentric would let go of Rem for a humanitarian reason like that. When you think, there's gotta be something else going on.
So he naturally settled on her as the one who had the best opportunity for an audience with my house.
Besides, I heard that Rem and Krush were having secret meetings every night. I hate myself for being an idiot and not considering what the discussions were about, though. I couldn't even manage a laugh for how I'd been unable to see beyond myself that whole time. After all, even though Rem had actually dropped plenty of hints to convey Roswaal's secret intentions, it had taken me until the fourth time to look back and realize it. So every night you've been meeting about forming an alliance. I heard from Rem all about what my side's offering for the terms of the deal.
The deal chiefly concerns magic crystals in the great Emilia forest and the mining rights thereof.
Just like that, Krush exposed what Subaru's words had only hinted at, seeing that there was nothing to hide. The instant the words reached the ears of the lone merchant present, his eyes glimmered.
My, that is quite a fascinating tale.
Russell, who had maintained his silence to that point, positively glowed. He sounded pleased now that the details finally concerned him in some way.
When one considers how magical stone craftsmanship has advanced by leaps and bounds in recent years, magic crystal mining rights hold ever-increasing value. That goes all the more for virgin territory.
Subaru could not conceal his surprise that the merchant had bit on the hook harder than expected. When he'd first heard about the mining rights from Rem, the fact that Krush had held out so far convinced Subaru that it wasn't all that attractive an offer.
Does it really have enough value to put you in such a good mood, Russell?
But of course, magical stone craftsmanship thrives in the markets of Kararagi, and magic crystal craftsmen of my own nation have polished their talents over many years. Recently, their products can be seen here and there, even gracing the hands of the general public. These days, the more magic crystals, the better. Until now, we have relied upon trade with Gusteco, to the north for most of our supply. So, I am overjoyed to learn of the existence of a rich local vein. A magic crystal is composed of mana. It is pure crystallized magic. Their attributes are greatly influenced by the land of their origin and the skill of the craftsmen who wrought them. In turn, the hand of a skilled craftsman can be applied to a variety of magic crystal crafts. If not mishandled, their intensity is excellent, lasting reliably for a period of several years. Surely it goes without saying that they make for very attractive merchandise.
However, the craftsmen able to work magic stones are few in number. Once a magic stone has been wrought, it is unprofitable to redo the work. At present, many mines have been placed under the kingdom's management, with the majority of magic crystals being distributed for public works. Though you say some reach the general public, it represents only a fraction.
There are no untouched mining sites that are not immediately snapped up the moment they are found. There is a rich history of succeeding generations of the Marquis of Mathers tapping undiscovered veins to build a fortune. And we have the Knight of Lady Emilia, a candidate in the royal selection, to vouch for it. It is a trustworthy bet.
Russell spoke in a fervent tone, slyly glancing at Subaru all the while. He had quite a rotten personality to know of Subaru's humiliation at the royal palace and still declare his word to be proof of anything. Nor did Subaru forget that dressing up the issue of mining rights in such a frivolous manner was meant to hold him in check. Russell was driving home for Subaru that this could not be unheard. Not that Subaru had the slightest intention of backing out to begin with.
Yeah, I don't mind if you trust that. I don't think we're villains enough to bluff at the first people we team up with over the course of a long royal selection.
Subaru could rest easy because Roswaal had been the one to propose selling the mining rights. Russell seemed to recoil deliberately in response to Subaru's answer.
I see. You would appear to have truly embraced the role of negotiator. I apologize for my rudeness in speaking as if I was testing you.
Nah, it's fine. After all, I plan on using all the stuff you just said for all it's worth over the rest of the conversation.
Subaru hadn't expected Russell to rate him highly to begin with. He'd correctly surmised that his ability would come into question, and his measure would be taken then and there. He prepared a topic offering an easy avenue of attack, avoiding an assault on a far more pernicious front before broaching the main issue. He could not conceal his relief that the bait had been taken as intended. He put on meaninglessly grandiose airs of amiability to conceal the tension in his cheeks.
Having said that, since he's apologized, I expect you to overlook one or two rude things I might say.
So you seated Russell Fellow at the same table in hopes of this? You are an unexpectedly crafty man yourself.
As Subaru flippantly commented, Krush smiled slightly and voiced her appraisal to end the exchange. The fact that she hadn't ended the discussion seemed to indicate she hadn't given him a failing grade. Even as he felt a cold sweat at having climbed over the first gate, Subaru maintained his friendly smile as he looked at Krush.
Well, I also wanted an advisor, since this is talking about profits, but calling Russell here has to do with the main topic coming next.
Really now? The main topic?
Subaru continued, and the atmosphere inside the room grew tense once more. Krush, who had merely been humoring the conversation to that point, rectified her seating and quietly closed her eyes for a time. After that, she slowly opened her amber eyes. Their gaze pierced Subaru like an arrow. Before its power sufficient to bring to mind a cold, blowing wind, Subaru did not falter. The tightening of his mind served only to make him straighten his back and put his feelings in order as he faced her.
Subaru Natsuki, I formally acknowledge you as the proxy of Marquis Roswaal, and also as an envoy from Emilia, and whatever details you and I negotiate will also hold true between Emilia and me.
All it took for her to overwhelm people was for her to face them head-on. Krush was not intentionally attempting to bowl Subaru over at that moment. All she'd done was switch mental gears from Krush, the private individual, to Krush Karsten, the public persona. Such was the power and presence of the current Duke of Karsten. This was what the valiant woman closest to the kingdom of Lugunika's throne really looked like. Subaru felt goosebumps rise as exclamation points danced inside his head. As he quietly shuddered, Krush extended a hand to him, firing the opening salvo to announce the start of the negotiations.
I believe you have already heard, but I shall state it regardless. Ram and I were negotiating the sale of mining rights, but I have not accepted the offer. Though I imagine you already knew this.
Yeah.
On the one hand was Rem, visibly lamenting her own insufficient strength. On the other hand was Subaru, pathetically unable to look past himself to even notice what had caused her such anguish. Subaru would take those two laments and regrets and put them to good use to avoid future distress, and so that all his previous failures would not be in vain.
I want to make sure of something myself, so the offer just isn't good enough as it stands. Each camp lays off the other. Mining rights for the Great Elure Forest are sold to you, and you work out the fine details of what to do with the magic crystals themselves later.
The draft proposal came from Rem's side, I suppose I should say, as to be expected of Marquis Roswaal. On top of securing profit for his own camp, he offers just enough advantage so that my house might accept it. Normally, it is an offer one would never refuse. Such a proposal makes me want to have a written agreement prepared immediately. But
Subaru couldn't speak in any informed manner about the arithmetic behind the deal. If he did clumsily say something, it could wind up being taken as, okay, take all the mining rights then.
In this case, what would follow such negotiations is the problem. Do you understand?
It's not simply that you don't trust Roswaal.
Subaru was of the opinion that if Roswaal's conduct was being questioned, he could rectify that by behaving with absolute propriety henceforth. But that wasn't Cruce's problem with it.
Making a deal with Emilia would mean an agreement with a rival royal selection candidate. Furthermore, one slandered as a half-demon. If one considers the consequences, caution is inevitable.
Subaru was unexpectedly discouraged to hear Crush quietly speak such words. The image he had of Crush was of someone so steadfast. The words majestic and sincere suited her. She had been the living incarnation of those things when stating her convictions at the Royal Selection Conference. It was precisely because he had heard her address that made her acting as if she cared about rumors seem so odd.
Don't tell me this is merely a justification for saying no.
Subaru, Fairy thinks that is really not the sort of thing you should say during an important negotiation.
Ferris had held his silence since the start of negotiations, but Subaru's careless remark brought anger to his smile. A vein on his forehead was bulging as Subaru quickly covered his mouth and lowered his head.
Goodness, this puts me in a bit of a bind.
As he did so, Crush, watching the exchange, loosened the corners of her lips very slightly.
It is I who is embarrassed to have my justification exposed so bluntly. I shall learn from this. The opportunity does not often arise.
With convoluted logic, she overlooked Subaru's present rudeness. That said, being saved by the awkwardness of his opponent's position put him in a precarious place.
So, that is an excuse for... Then you don't really think that forming an alliance with Emilia is a terrible thing in and of itself?
Subaru Natsuki, I shall correct one misconception.
Crush raised a finger, pointing it towards Subaru.
A person's worth is decided by how her soul lives and how it shines. A person's true nature is absolutely not determined by the circumstances of one's birth and where someone was raised.
Of course, even Crush understood that they had an indirect influence. She did not lack the power of imagination to deduce how the senseless cruelties inflicted by Emilia's environment, simply because she was a half-elf, had strengthened her in the process.
Her words at the royal selection site were not false. It is because I am certain of her pride and resolve that I acknowledge Emilia as a rival.
Well, that's convoluted. In other words...
Forgive me, I have a fondness for theatrics.
Crush pursed her lips slightly, seemingly fully aware of just how grandiose her own statement was. A moment later, her expression tightened.
I am not refusing an alliance with Emilia because she is a half-elf. From my perspective, Emilia, who is in no way politically opposed to me, is not someone I need to go out of my way to antagonize. I would even be willing to ally with her.
Meaning that...
Do not be so hasty to reply, Subaru Natsuki. It is no exaggeration to say that what you utter, and how your words are interpreted, will determine the course of these events.
Crush chided Subaru for assuming her reply was favorable as she threw the ball into his court once more. In other words, now that Subaru held the right to negotiate, she wanted to see what cards were in his hand.
Mining rights for the Great Ilior Forest would be highly advantageous for my side. On the other hand, it is a fact that there is no need for me to rush to get ahead in the royal selection. The period of time is 3 years. Too much haste to stir things up would sow the seeds for troubles down the road.
So you're saying the advantages and disadvantages of forming an alliance with Emilia don't match up?
Not precisely. At present, the advantages and disadvantages cancel each other out. By my house's thinking, we require convincing, a push for us to take that one final step.
Crush seemed personally in favor of the idea of forming an alliance. On the other hand, a noble house was apparently too large to be swayed purely by Crush's private opinion on the matter. Hence, she sought something from Subaru, something that would silence the voices around her urging her not to stir things up. When Subaru tried to speak, he was a little surprised at how his own throat seemed to be blocked. The tension and anxiety welling up in his chest blocked his throat just as he was on the verge of stepping forward. From here on would be completely ad-libbed in a way he had never before experienced.
I hadn't checked it with anyone. It was possible I was reading this wrong, but Krush would probably bite. Yes, I believed in my own idea. To form an alliance, we're offering mining rights and information.
Information. Information?
When she heard the word, Krush stroked her own long hair as she prompted him to continue. She hadn't decided yet. Now came the hard part.
Yeah, that's right. I'm offering a certain piece of information with it.
Then I would hear it. Will these words from your lips stir us to action?
Naturally, Subaru's entire body trembled from anxiety and tension, but a slight warm sensation to his elbow drove all that away. For Rem's fingers touching Subaru's arm were the spark that lit the borrowed courage within him. Subaru inhaled. In a single breath, he said,
The card I'm playing is the time and place where the white whale will show up.